Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the Tuesday, November 1st, 2022 Roanoke County School Board work session to order. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Here. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Quite a lengthy agenda today, so we'll try to get through it as quickly as we can. We'll jump right into number 2.01, general discussion of delivery methods for construction projects.
So, Mr. Chairman, at the request and invitation of the board, we have with us today familiar face, Mr. Troy Smith from Avis Construction, with whom we worked with on a couple projects now. Just to kind of refresh our memory about some different delivery methods when it comes to construction projects, but especially hearing it from the sort of industry point of view. And of course, we'll approach this from a high-level position, not really get into any specific projects, but really value Mr. Smith's expertise and appreciate his willingness to come and join us this afternoon and do this summary for us.
Very good. Welcome, Mr. Smith.
Thank you for having me. And I realize you do have a long agenda today, so I'm going to keep it brief and non-project specific as directed. So basically in construction, and I'll keep this, as I told Dr. Nicely last week, this will be pretty informal. So if I say something and you have a question, just feel free to raise your hand or interrupt me, and it can be as casual as y'all would like it. There are basically three delivery methods, and I gave you a handout that I'm essentially going to read from that was put together. You have design, bid, build, which was how we did Cave Spring. You have design, build, which is how William Byrd is under construction. And then you have PPP, or in Virginia, PPEA, as it's referred to. Both of those are the same thing. In a design, bid, build project, the design, build is a project delivery method that typically involves three phases. You have a designer. The county would engage a designer to develop the construction documents. Then those documents would be put out to bid, and then the lowest qualified bidder would be awarded the project, and then it would go under construction. It's pretty simple. Design build is where the county hires a design builder who hires the architects and the engineers and collaborates with, and a lot of times the school district, sometimes administrators at the high school or the school level, and then they develop the plans. A GMP, a guaranteed maximum price, is defined early. You generally start construction in most cases before the documents are completed. So one advantage in the design build to the design bid build is you have a guaranteed maximum price early on, and construction starts a little sooner than it typically would in a design bid build scenario. Then you have a PPEA, where a developer there's two methods. You could have a solicited or unsolicited bid or proposal. A developer puts together a package for a school system that includes financing, it includes all the design, it includes all the engineering, it includes all the construction, and also all the financing. And that financing can be from 15 to 30 years. Typically, it's more in the 20 to 30 year range. But those at a very high level are the three delivery methods. In order to determine which delivery method is the best one for your project, there's a list of questions on page 3. Is the need for the project immediate? Are you okay to wait for the project and risk that it could be delayed or that costs could increase? Is the total cost of ownership important to the school district? Does the school district want to own the buildings or lease the buildings? What kind of risk is the school system looking to mitigate? Interest rate inflation, bid day first cost, or operating cost? And does the locality have the cash flow to incur those risks over time? Is the contractor early engagement important? Is it important to the jurisdiction or the locality? How important is innovation? Typically, the private sector is much more innovative at coming up with solutions than a traditional design, bid, build scenario. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. So the design bid process, I've got an organizational chart here that shows the school district would hire the architect and the general contractor, and then separately, if you needed to have financing, have a lender involved. The engineers work under the architect and the subcontractors work under the general contractor. Some advantages to design, bid, build. The owner controls design and construction under separate contracts. So the architect and the contractor at no point in time are collaborating. Design changes are easily accommodated prior to start of construction. So as the project's being designed between the school district and the architect, that's where changes are made. If during the plan review, you guys see something that you want to change, the designer changes it before the contractor even sees it or can have any input. The design is completed prior to construction. The construction cost is fixed at contract award, so you don't know what the actual cost of the project's going to be until it's bid and you know who the lowest qualified bidder is. And through public procurement, the lowest qualified bidder is always who gets the project. And it's a relatively easy form of implementation. It's what we've all done for years. It's kind of the tried and true method, if you will. And typically design, bid, build projects are for the more traditional design solutions for schools. I mean, there's nothing really innovative that comes out of the design, bid, build process. Some other considerations. I was going to call these disadvantages, but they're not really disadvantages, just considerations. Requires a significant owner expertise and resources because the school district would be working with the designer to completely design the school. Does not promote a collaborative process. I'll touch on that a little bit later. The owner is at risk to the contractor for design errors. So if we get into construction and find mistakes, it's usually design mistakes. And I mean, to be truthful, there's no way an architect or an engineer can find kind of all the skeletons in the closet when they have, maybe 2 months to look at a school that's 50 years old or so. Construction cost unknown until contract award. There's no contractor input, which means during the design phase, there's no value engineering or no life cycle cost analysis being done. May require redesign if the bid amount is greater than budget. And those costs, a lot of times when that happens, the amount you get back for the changes that are made is not a dollar for dollar. Architect and contractor, I put this one in here because this is kind of the old running joke. Architect and contractor often blame the other party for problems that occur. So as much as we like to say there's teamwork, sometimes there's teamwork, sometimes there's not.
We've kind of lived through that.
The next process, design build process. School district hires the design builder. The design builder hires the architect and the subcontractors, and the design builder provides a GMP once design is complete. And in this organizational chart, you can see the school district, the design builder, and then the architect and the subcontractors work for the design builder. This is the scenario we have at William Byrd. And if financing is required, the school district is getting that on their own. Some advantages.
Saved us considerable cost.
Yeah, so some advantages, a single entity, in this case me, responsible for design and construction, the contractor or design builder. Construction often starts before the design is complete. So most of the time, we're able to get to a GMP price and start construction before the documents are complete. So we will submit the plans to in this case, the county, get partial approvals to start certain portions of work before the documents are complete. For example, at William Byrd, we had all the trailers set up and everything while we were still completing documents. So that wasn't sequential, if that makes sense. Construction cost is fixed during design, so the locality or the school district has some price certainty. Transfer of risk from owner to design build entity. The emphasis, and I think this is an important one, the emphasis is on best value with improved project quality. Requires less owner expertise and resources. Qualification and pricing-based selection. Reduces potential for design changes after construction. Some considerations. Again, I did not call this disadvantages, so some considerations. reduced owner-controlled design and construction quality. And that's an important one to kind of understand. So in the design-build process, you have to have collaboration. So you have the principal, the assistant principal, the department heads. We have all of those people involved to give them the best function for their space. So they have direct input as to what they want the labs to look like, what they want certain classrooms to look like. And so it's pretty intensive collaboration early on to develop the plans. Then once those plans are developed, there are several scenarios where we go back and forth to review and make little tweaks and review again and make little tweaks. And the administration or staff at the school has the power to say, well, I understand we're doing this, but they can live with that. We'll do, maybe we'll make some sacrifices here instead of here, but that's at the administration level. That's not at the contractor level. And a lot of times we develop bridging documents as part of this process. The next, there's a map here of the United States where PPP or PPEA is authorized. Obviously, Virginia is one of them. And Roanoke County has guidelines set forth that you have adopted. It's essentially the state guidelines, so it's in line with those. PPEA, you have a single point responsibility for design, construction, financing, and operations. So in the design build process, there's no financing component. In the PPEA method, there's a financing component. It transfers all the risk to a private partner that is binding, and you'll hear different scenarios and you will see and read different proposals. That agreement that a locality and a developer come up with is completely negotiable between those two entities. There's sort of some standards, but again, where the innovation comes in, you can be very creative with those. Again, they can be 15 years, they can be 30 years, they can be slightly longer if you want. They're typically between 20 and 30 years. It creates a culture of collaboration between the owner, designers, contractors, and the private partners. Creates incentives for teams to accomplish the public's goal and eliminates finger pointing. It emphasizes best value. Private partners typically bear all cost for the detailed proposal, which includes conceptual designs, financing plans, and operation cost. Projects can be structured using taxable or tax-exempt financing. Team members must be flexible, available, and trust one another. Trust is a huge factor in a PPEA. And I can't overemphasize trust in that first bullet point enough. Each team member must understand that the success of the project is more important than their own agenda. I'm going to repeat that because that's probably the second most important thing on a PPEA, is that each team member must understand that the success of the project is more important than their own agenda. Requires a thoughtful contract that defines the goals and objectives that will determine success. Requires a team that has extensive experience in the building type. Private equity is usually only required for very complex projects with high operating costs. The next page, you'll see an organizational chart for a PPEA. You have the school district, the design builder, the architects, and the subcontractors. And what is different about this, instead of the lender portion coming off just the school district, it comes from the design builder. The next page is a project schedule that is a general interpretation of some of the advantages time-wise. So on the bottom, you have a design, bid, build, schedule. Traditionally, the design build scenario is 15 to 20% faster. And then the PPEA process is usually 15 to 20% faster than even the design build process. And all of these this is a generic schedule, so this isn't always the case, but traditionally it's a little faster than even design build. The next couple of pages just describe the process in Virginia, which is essentially what Roanoke County's guidelines are. There's nothing really new there. Roanoke County has guidelines for receiving an unsolicited proposal and how to handle that. They can accept it and put out an RFP for others to propose, or they can reject it, or they can put out an RFP and just solicit proposals to begin with. So there's options there. The last page is just a quick summary, which is summary of the earlier questions. Is schedule important? The school district just needs to determine themselves what's most important to them. Is it the schedule, total cost of ownership, risk mitigation, cash flow limitations, contractor engagement, et cetera? And then on the innovation, one thing I'll mention is typically when it comes to innovation, design, bid, build projects, like I mentioned, are more traditional solutions for problems. I mean, if you want to do an elementary school, not saying they're all cookie cutter, but you're going to get the same, Virginia requires a certain square foot, classroom, the hallways to be a certain size, the lunchroom to be a certain size for the number of students. Within a PPEA, where I mentioned innovation and the private sector, you start using things like daylight harvesting, rainwater harvesting, solar becomes much more of an option. You can use pervious concrete or pervious asphalt, and you can do a green roof. So there's other tax advantages that maybe a school district can't take advantage of that the private sector can, and you can incorporate those savings and those innovations into a PPEA project easier than you can a design bid build or even a design build project. And that is short, sweet, and a very fast, high-level discussion on the 3 delivery methods for construction projects.
Okay, start with one question, just to clarify, because we have the experience with the William Byrd project. So we can't discuss a specific project, we can discuss the current one and the previous one.
Right.
So with William Byrd, we started with a process whereby, contractors such as yourself teamed up with architects and basically submitted some general proposals in terms of some, design ideas and some general things and so forth. Later on, once your company was selected, we got, much more detailed, obviously, architectural drawings. Is that would that be similar in a PPEA process, between design bid in terms of the starting point, in terms of, we were to put out specs, put an RFP, and people came back with a proposal, would it be that, so would it probably start off with that sort of general idea and concept?
The very beginning part would be very similar. You would have proposers, you would have a developer engage with an architect and respond to your RFP. And in that RFP, you may say, we want a new elementary school and a new high school. You would give some guidelines as to the number of students in each, maybe the number of classrooms in each, and anything that may be specific to whatever schools you were referring to. And then you would have the proposers provide you that information in their proposal. You would probably bring them in here, we would interview, and then you would select a proposer to move forward with. It's very similar, the very first steps of that are very similar, where an unsolicited proposal is where you might just, in the mail, you might get a proposal to do that same elementary school and high school without putting out an RFP, and then the county can reject it and just say, thanks, but we're not taking those. Or you could accept it, at which time, through your guidelines, you would just follow your guidelines. I think you would put out an RFP and give 45 days for other people to respond to that.
Right. Do you find that one of these lends itself better to, let's say, a renovation project like a Byrd versus a new construction kind of project?
We were talking about project specifics again.
That's not, William Byrd is a current one. That's legal.
And I think that's done.
I'm just
I think for a renovation project, the design build process works very well. And I say that because, again, in the design bid build scenario, you hire an architect who's going to spend 2 or 3 months developing plans, where in the scenario at William Byrd, we spent months going through and trying to find all those skeletons and lessons learned from other projects we've done with the county to try to come up with the best way to skin that cat and come up with the best design and the best value. If that makes sense.
It does, and that was gonna be my question, and maybe, because the 2 projects we've been involved with since I've been on the board have both been mostly remodels with a little bit of new construction, and I think our next 3 projects that we're looking at are all gonna be 100% new construction, and maybe we can't discuss, the advantages of that,
Right.
or which of these 3 models
But I
may
think
be
you could
most
say if you had
advantageous.
3 schools,
Yeah.
I think you could use it generically if you had 3 schools.
These are hypothetical.
Or if you had 2 elementary schools that were exactly the same floor plan.
Right.
There's some economies and savings there for that. You know,
It's
you're
like
not
build-
hiring
like
an
building a
architect
house
to design
over and over.
one and an architect to design another one. It's the same design.
Right.
Same thing with residential.
Exactly.
You know, if you're building the same house plan, you kind of gather fruition through the cost.
Right.
And the methods.
It's easier to build 10 of those than it is to build one of those because you can spread the cost over more houses.
What I think out of this, I'd like for us to hear is, so design, bid, build, we have had experience, and that got off to an extremely rocky start. Design, build has went really well, at least in my mind, and I hope everybody else, we haven't had a lot of the bickering that we had, and things that didn't go exactly right. But then the PPEA, and through discussions outside of this room, so if you're doing it, let's go to the design build versus the PPEA. If you're doing the design build, you're getting a price, whatever generic school of $25 million. With a PPEA, because that's going to be owner, leased back.
Leased.
You're going to lease that back to us and finance it, and you're going to have all the inherent cost of if prices go up, if interest rates change, any of those dynamics. So wouldn't that make that project much higher than the design build?
Potentially. And it all depends on, again, the agreement that is structured between the school district and the private partner. So a lot of times in the PPEA, the private partner would put out a price, and that would be the price, irregardless of price increases. So you would be sort of protected price-wise, but the actuality is that price may be a little higher because now you have a private partner taking on that risk. Where through a design-build project, we've still, the developer, the design builder has provided a GMP, so you're kind of protected price-wise there because you know what the ceiling is. And you knew in both of those scenarios, you know the price early. But
Right.
again, remember I
guess-
said trust on the design builder.
Sure.
So you have to have a lot of trust that when the design builder is coming in and saying, well, I think this project's going to be $27 million, that it's going to, you have to have some trust that we really know what we're talking about, and that's what it's going to be. Fortunately, that's proven the case at Williamsburg. It's worked out well.
It's worked out really well.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my point and where I'm trying to derive is, in design build, we know, like you said, there may be, because, you're still taking risk on to those costs. So, but we know it's $25 million. On the PPEA, don't you have to inflate that somewhat? Not you, but whoever.
Right, so the private partner is taking on all the risk.
Right.
So much like the agreement between the private partner and the school district is important, the financing the private partner is getting is equally as important. And, whatever financing package the private partner may be getting, maybe the jurisdiction or the school district doesn't have that much say in that because the private partner's financing it. So there could be agreements in there where if there was cost escalation or things like that, that's worked out through the financing package, maybe not necessarily passed along in the price of the project. Because there's other, there's utilities, the innovations, maybe we'll use solar, for example. Let's say we do you get a proposal to do a new high school, you put solar on the roof, well, the private partner's getting the initial tax credits for the solar, not the school district, because you're just leasing the building.
Facility.
And so you have the private partner who's maintaining it, who's dealing with all the utilities, who's getting the tax advantages from those innovations. And so it's in the private partner's interest to try to be as innovative as possible to help accumulate's not the right word, but to take advantage of as many of those things as you can to help, one, protect the price you've given and to help the financing package.
Well, I guess where I'm trying to get to, and I don't know if I'm asking it right or not, but is you've got 25 million today. You're not going to lease it to us and come out at 25 million at the end, right? You're going to lease it to us, and then we may buy it for 25 million at the end. See what I'm saying?
Or
So the
30.
cost- Or whatever, yeah,
Right.
the cost, well, the lease payments, are
Yeah,
gravy.
They don't start till the school district takes over the school. So let's just say, let's just use William Byrd if we could for an example. Let's say that's a 3-year project. You've been paying monthly to the contractor for pay apps, where in a PPEA scenario, you would pay out a penny. You wouldn't pay out a penny until it was done. And then, so you're kind of deferring the cost through lease payments until the job is done, and then whatever term the financing package is structured.
Yeah.
And so maybe that makes sense. I mean, maybe, 25 million over the course of 3 years, engineering econ is, maybe that's 35 million over the course of 30 years. Maybe it's 50, and then you've only ended up paying 45, depending on how that is structured.
So breaking it down to more simple, to me, it's like leasing a copier. You pay $20,000 for a $3,000 copier over 4 or 5 years. right?
Potentially.
And if I understand this correctly, the PPEA, it still goes against our debt limit from the Board of Supervisors.
So, I've done some research on that. There are financing packages where the debt service wouldn't be against the locality. However, what I've read is most localities will still consider it against their debt service because they are lease payments they are going to have to make at some point in the future. I think there's
trying to
probably
find
a
the
moral
advantage, I
and
guess.
ethical reason for keeping it on the debt service
Sure.
on that line item.
I'm just trying to find a reason why we even consider that, I
Right.
guess. Okay.
Well, and again, it's always worth considering.
Yeah.
It's always worth going through the exercise, and even if you end up not doing it, at least you better understand what options are out there for future projects. I mean, if you've got 2 schools you want to do now, I mean, I'm sure you've got more schools than that over the next 10 years, 15 years, 20
Absolutely.
years. And so the more informed and educated you get on these delivery methods, the better. The
Absolutely.
better for the school district.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong, the PPP, I love all the acronyms. The real advantage could be and should be the possibility of using tax credits, which then drives down the cost
Exactly.
into storage.
And
That's all I need
that's
to
the
hear.
that's the whole impetus behind the private entity doing it. I mean, they're gonna get the tax credits. And those tax credits help keep the construction costs down. They offset construction costs.
Yeah. And you don't jack up the price so people think they're getting a discount.
No.
No, these are tax, just so to know. So these
No.
are tax credits that are given, and they're set standard credits that help
They're
us.
real tax credits.
They're real tech, right?
Yes, real tax credits.
So the advantage is there.
Yeah, the advantage is there. And again, for highly complex projects or say projects where you have multiple schools involved, it makes a lot of sense to consider that, to give it real serious consideration.
Okay.
Mr. Ray?
Yeah, any local examples of PPP or PPEA?
I know Montgomery County's done it a few times. I think they're in the middle of Christiansburg High School as a PPEA, if I'm not mistaken. But there are other school districts, certainly in the state of Virginia, that do it. There's a lot more in Northern Virginia and in the Richmond area. It's more prevalent in those areas.
Is that because of the number of schools they have?
Yeah, they're building new schools all the time. I mean, just to try to keep up with population growth, if nothing else. And they're much more of the mindset, if a school's 20 years old, we'll just tear it down and build a new one. They don't, a lot of the, you go to Fredericksburg or places like that, they don't have 50-year-old schools. They tear them down and build new ones.
I guess that would be with more.
We have a different mindset here in southwestern Virginia. We don't have the population growth
We
like
don't
they
have the
do
money
too.
they have.
Right,
That's right.
right.
The ADM's not the same.
Exactly. I mean, we're getting ready to start the Ruffner CTE, and you walk through that 50-plus-year-old school, and the terrazzo looks great, and I mean, they don't build them like they used to,
Yeah.
just like cars.
This building directly behind us was PPEA, right? The County?
That was my understanding.
Yeah, I think so. And I know Roanoke County does a lot of their fire stations that way.
All right.
Any other questions?
Well, you guys certainly know how to get me, so if you have any other questions
Should
or,
we ask anything about solar? Is there any solar questions?
I'm not an expert on solar, but I know there are school systems where it works well and others where it doesn't. You just need to be careful through the design phase and, make sure you've got the right team together and get the right system in place.
Do your independent study.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of places are doing solar roofs and green roofs, and then they're converting all their buses to electric, and whatever electric the school's not using, converting those to their buses. Fuel's not getting any cheaper.
Yeah, y'all into electric buses.
These are electric buses.
No, y'all, so.
Thank you, Troy.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
much. Appreciate
Yep,
it.
thank you.
Item number
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
2.02, review of the due diligence work completed by Balzer and Associates for the new CTE Center. We have,
Mr. Chairman, we have Ben Crew and Chris Burns back with us. Appreciate all the work they've done, and I wanted to invite them back today to review the material that you've heard to the extent that you want, or you get the opportunity to ask questions, among our board.
Has anything changed since we had our joint meeting?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so from our side, so thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. It was a joint board session with a lot of discussion and a longer evening, but we want to make sure that we just provide you all a quick update. This plan is no different from what you saw at the joint work session. We covered a handful of questions that were out there as far as some of the environmental questions and where we are in the due diligence process and where we are as far as, checking out this site and making sure that what we're planning as far as square footage, as far as scope, as far as direction with the property, is all checking out. And so we don't have, 30 minutes of rundown to go down through with you all this afternoon, but we just wanted to share, a couple of highlights, and I'll let Chris Burns jump in here in just a minute, as far as, expand upon where we are, and then most certainly answer any questions that you all have as far as, where we are in the process, because, we've developed scope. We've identified the opportunities on the site. We've put together a footprint. We've identified, access locations, utility compliance, and we really wanted to make sure that this site is checking the boxes for what you all are trying to do. And we're headed in that direction. We feel positive about where we are, but certainly want to give you all an opportunity to ask any additional questions from the joint work session. So, Chris, do you want to add anything on as far as background from your side, and then we'll open it up to the group?
Sure, yeah, so just to kind of give an update on where we are, after the joint board session last week, we're wrapping up our final due diligence report, and that's just about done and ready to send out. Not a lot of earth-shattering updates from what we shared last week. I'm not going to go down through the executive summary again, but yeah, just wanted to kind of open it up. There were some questions and some more detailed questions that came up last week, and we didn't get a chance to really get into the details too much, but wanted to kind of open it up today in case you all had additional questions as far as anything that we talked about last week or anything moving forward with the project.
Yeah, because there's a from Roanoke County side, there's a financing part. From your all side, this is going to be your facility moving forward. So we just want to make sure we gave you all the opportunity to ask any questions at this point in the process.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
yes, ma'am.
So do you have a list of people that we could reach out to for an independent study on solar?
We can come up with one. Yes, we can certainly provide recommendations on that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
We're about 60 days away from having to pull the trigger and either purchase or go with a little more hard money and buy an extension for those agreements that we have. The wetlands, I know, came up as a question the other day. Well, when do you anticipate having an answer on whether there's going to be any significant potential costs with any wetlands on the property.
Chris, you wanna talk about the wetlands?
Yeah, so we don't anticipate anything there. We've had one of our staff on the ground. I don't think we can give a definitive response on that until we're able to actually walk the entire site. There's a lot of vegetation out there currently that kind of prevents that. And so I think that analysis is probably best to take place over the winter when the vegetation is more sparse. And that's certainly something that we could provide fairly quickly, but we may need some clearing to occur in order to access certain areas.
Yeah, so what we're hoping for is in the next 30 days, when the leaves are off, when the vegetation's down, we can kind of clear that as well and take a look down there in some of those special areas.
How much does the wetlands cover?
That potential area is down near on the right-hand side of the page, down near the stormwater management facility. As far as the specific area, we're going to stay out of the area of the creek, and we just want to make sure that we've got the appropriate horizontal configuration for the pond down there.
Is the Army Corps of Engineers responsible for the creek area?
So they would be responsible for the wetland side and any associated vegetation down through there. Yeah, and so if we needed to provide whatever level permitting that we anticipate with this, which we anticipate to be standard because we could, realign the pond as we need to, they would be a party to that permit.
Is there such thing as mitigating wetlands?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what would be involved?
Which we would try to avoid, yes, which we would try to avoid. So there's certain, without getting into the details, there's certain thresholds. You can disturb a certain amount before there's mitigation costs, which you just mentioned, and we would certainly try to push for or configure the site to eliminate any mitigation costs as a first measure. Because there's a lot of room down there in that section of the site that we can utilize and, modify the configuration to avoid those areas if we can.
It really has nothing to do with the footprint of the building or anything else.
It's more of a functional discussion and make sure we spend dollars the best way that we can as far as design goes.
And with the current site layout, we don't anticipate needing to permit any impact. We don't anticipate any impacts to streams or wetlands. It's just, at this point, it's not a final determination on those, and so we feel
So
like
it's really nothing
still
to
need
hold us up from moving forward
With,
on the wetland.
with the confirmation?
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep,
I guess to come back to your question.
yep.
Well, he said we have 60 days, so 30 days those leaves will be off. I would feel better waiting 30 days, have you guys do what you need to do and give us 100% clear if you can.
Correct. Yep. And as
Time
far-
is on our side, why not take advantage of it?
That's right, absolutely, absolutely. No, so the final boxes from our side is, let's, finalize a report. Let's also have a meeting with the localities and VDOT and Water Authority to talk through where we're headed with this. That's kind of standard practice once you get to a concept plan that you feel comfortable with. So that'll also occur in the next, 3.5 weeks. And after that, we'll be in a good place as far as the due diligence report goes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Ray?
On the side where the business is and the property line goes sort of through the middle of that driveway, I guess it's a bigger easement than it looks, right? How far is it from that driveway?
So there's an easement for the Bojangles access that is, I forget how far it is. It's 10 or 15 feet from the edge of the pavement into the property. And it's not an exclusive, I don't believe it's an exclusive easement, but it's 10 or 15 feet across that, from the edge of that curve. Yeah, so we can grade in it, we can modify it, because, if you remember, that section where you go up to approach Bojangles has a real steep slope on that side. And so we would make sure that we tie in appropriately in that area.
Yeah, road or nothing will be effective there.
Right.
Okay, right.
part of the scope of work also includes some just high-level confirmation of potential pricing for, the two elementary schools. So we haven't really talked about that. Is that something that's going to be coming a little later, or?
Yeah, RRMM couldn't be here today, but they have started running an analysis on that. I know they've got some preliminary numbers. We may want to vet those a little bit more in terms of the number of students that we're basing that on and questions of that nature. But that effort's already begun, yes.
You have a specific delivery time frame or a
No, I just want
goal?
to make
a
sure I
goal?
mentioned that, just to remind the board that was part of the
Okay,
scope.
sure, okay, perfect,
Any other questions? All right.
okay.
Thank you,
Bill. Nice-
gentlemen.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Item number 2.03, recap of Bullying Education and Prevention Month. Dr. Hughes and Ms. Garlow, welcome.
Thank you. So of course, October was Bullying Prevention Month, and so we thought we would back up and share a little bit about what we did this past month and kind of recap on our programming for our schools. All right. Next slide. Oh, sorry. All right, and just to give you a little background information, in 2018, Dr. Nicely asked us to do a full evaluation of our bullying program. And as part of that process, we obtained student voice through our Student Advisory Committee. We also met with administrators and counselors in each one of our school buildings in order to just gather some basic information and see what the concerns were as we were working on bullying. We reviewed a variety of different policies from other localities and states, and we also reviewed the Virginia Department of Education model policy on bullying. Out of this came our definition of bullying, which is any aggressive or unwanted behavior that's intended to harm, intimidate, or humiliate the target. It involves a real or perceived imbalance of power between the aggressor and the target, and it may or may not be repeated over time. It can cause severe emotional trauma. Bullying includes cyberbullying. It does not include ordinary teasing or horseplay or peer conflict. So then it's necessary to talk about what conflict is. We see a lot of conflict in our schools. It's disagreements between two or more people where each person involved is participating. It may involve repeated discussion and actions by all parties and may go on for a period of time before resolution occurs. Conflict mediation is what we recommend in order to address conflict. Conflict is not bullying, but it certainly can lead to such behavior. So bullying is distinctly different from conflict. Very often the word is misused and needs a little bit of clarification. Physical bullying might be hitting or punching. Verbal bullying might be calling someone a name, but that doesn't necessarily rise to what we call bullying unless other criteria is met. And so some of that criteria is it aggressive? Is it an unwanted act? Is there a power differential? Is it repeated over time, or does it cause severe emotional trauma? Otherwise, we consider it unkind and mean behavior, which we typically see a lot of. Our counselors and our school staff work hard to teach students and staff that most of our behaviors are conflict, where both parties or several students participate. However, in just a few cases, conflict can rise to the level of bullying, but just not as common as what people think. The overuse of the word encourages people to call many behaviors bullying when they are just really unkind and mean behaviors. Later, we'll talk a little bit about how we teach our students to handle disrespectful, unkind, and mean behaviors, because we definitely don't want these behaviors to turn into bullying situations. So let's focus a little bit on what we do for bullying prevention. We have a bullying contact person in each one of our schools. We also have available, if needed, a bullying committee in our schools. The most important thing that we do, though, is the annual prevention education, and this is provided to all of our students as well as our staff. This is our PBIS Expect Respect, which is bullying prevention. We have a variety of activities that our schools do. We give them voice and choice in this area to help increase awareness. We do messaging through PSAs to our students. And another important thing is just being visible in our schools. So it's important for our students, for our staff and our teachers to be available before school, after school, and during the change of classes in case students need them. And we have available resources in our schools. We utilize a three-tiered approach to provide our education for all of our stakeholders. We do student boosters annually. We provide staff boosters on bullying prevention, and we also provide parent education. We have sent out webinars to parents on what Expect Respect is, and we've also done some evening presentations. So now let's talk a little bit about what the programming looks like for our students.
Okay. So our CPS has been implementing PBIS for a few years now, and part of this is Expect Respect, an evidence-based bullying prevention program. Some key features of this program include universal language K through 12 and explicit instruction on concepts and behaviors. This stop, walk, and talk model consists of 4 strategies to interrupt disrespectful behavior so that it doesn't escalate into a bullying situation. Each strategy consists of steps that include a way to stop, walk, and talk. So in general, you have the stop strategy, which gives, where the student gives a school-wide stop phrase when they hear or see disrespect. Then there is the upstander strategy, where that's where they can stick up for a friend or a peer, and they can interrupt that disrespectful behavior. There's the get help strategy, when they decide who and when to ask for help. And then there's a stopping strategy, and that's what to do when someone asks you to stop your behavior. Okay, so to get more specific, the first strategy is the stop strategy. This is where they interrupt the disrespectful behavior. It's broken down into 4 steps. You can see those. So the first one would be using the stop phrase that the school has already agreed upon. That might sound like, please stop, this looks disrespectful. I don't like what you're doing. I don't like what you're saying. Really depends on the situation. The step 2 is to walk. So if the person stops, you can take a deep breath and move on with your day. Step 3, if they don't stop, you decide whether you're going to ignore them or seek more support. And then the final one is the talk step. If you decide that you need more support, you select a school adult or a friend or a peer or a student, and you ask them for more support. So this is an example of the stop strategy that's been used in an elementary school that I'm going to get Chuck to play.
If you see disrespectful behavior, say stop. I don't like that. Walk away. And ask an adult for help.
So that's just one of the ways they teach it to our elementary students.
If you see disrespect,
Okay. The second strategy is the bystander strategy, which we refer to as the upstander strategy for students who witness disrespectful behavior. This is how students may stand up for each other by asking the disrespectful student to stop, walking away with the disrespected student, and talking with them in a supportive way. And so you can see, they help the student get the behavior to stop. They walk away, they leave the area with the student who's being targeted, and then they talk to them and say, I'm sorry that happened to you, you didn't deserve that. And here is an example that they use in high school. If Chuck could play that for us.
Is this you? Yeah. Your Insta post is trash.
Kind of cut it off a little bit. Okay. Here's an example of a PSA about upstanders provided through the radio morning announcements, which are broadcast to students in grades 9 through 12.
Someone who witnesses bullying, either in person or online, is a bystander. Witnessing bullying upsetting and affects the bystander too. Bystanders have the potential to make a positive difference in a bullying situation by becoming an upstander. An upstander is someone who sees what happens and intervenes, interrupts, or speaks up to stop.
Okay.
Someone.
Okay. The third strategy is the get help strategy, and this is when a student may have asked someone to stop doing whatever the behavior was, and the person didn't stop. So the student would then ask a friend or adult for help if they needed more support. And that just looks like, going to the adult, going to the friend and saying, hey, I'm having a problem with so-and-so. I asked them to stop, and they kept going. And then the adult can help them with some next steps, or if it's a friend, they can be an upstander and say something to the person or walk away with them, get them out of that situation. Okay? The last strategy is for any time someone asks you to stop. You should stop, even if you don't think you're doing anything wrong. Say okay to the person who asked you to stop, walk away, take a deep breath, and move on with your day. Okay. There are some lessons embedded in Expect Respect to address disrespectful behavior online as well. If you saw a disrespectful comment online, you could ask the person to stop. Then you could assist the person who's being targeted to leave the app or leave the chat, wherever it is, and perhaps report that comment using the platform's reporting procedure. Then share with a trusted adult if you need more support. And that just follows that same stop, walk, talk model. It's just modified a little bit where the stop is asking them to stop online. And the walk piece is like helping them get out of the comments or get away from whatever's being said. And the talk piece is reporting it, getting an adult if you need more help. Online etiquette is embedded in many of our classes, our media centers, our computer and technology instruction, and our counseling presentations. So during a student voice activity, students were asked what makes them proud of their middle school. If you could play that.
So I really appreciate you meeting with me today. Can you share with me some things at this middle school that you're most proud of?
Some things that I'm most proud of are, I feel like there's not really much bullying going on in our school. I feel like everyone's relatively nice to each other and understands what's going on for other people and stuff.
If kids were bullied, has anybody worked with classes to know how to respond if there is somebody bullying? Do counselors do that, or maybe?
Yeah, I say they would. They do.
Have you ever had a counselor come to your class and talk specifically about bullying since you've been here?
Yes, many times at my elementary school and middle school, yes.
That's awesome. Okay, do they talk about Expect Respect?
Mm-hmm, yes.
And you think kids, even though they might go, oh, not another class, do you think kids are learning since you said there's not a lot of bullying here?
Yeah, I think kids are definitely learning because there's, like you said, not a lot of bullying.
Awesome, thank you.
So here is other supplemental list of things that are going on in our schools. Media PSAs, again, through the news, radio, or announcements. Several of our schools have done spirit-themed weeks and dress-up days during the month of October. Random acts of kindness. So I know we talk a lot about bullying, but we really want our students to do kind things. So a lot of times we'll encourage kids to sit with the new students at lunch, or they do rocks where they write kind messages and share those. Kindness notes on Post-it notes, writing nice things to other students. We've also seen them on lockers. Some of our students do pledges where they take a pledge to be bully-free or to be an upstander. In elementary schools, we see some fill the bucket challenges where students actually write something that has been kind that they have seen in school. And then we have food drives, of course, and Wear Blue Day for bullying prevention, or even wearing orange for Unity Day. Other ways that Expect Respect is shared in the schools include some door decorating contests, which is the first two, and then also Unity Day celebration where the school wears orange to promote kindness, acceptance, and also inclusion. Here is some of the data that we have been collecting with our Expect Respect implementation. We began collecting data in 2019, 2020, when we started Expect Respect in the schools. And then in 2020, 2021, we implemented the survey in elementary, and 88% of our students in elementary knew the stop phrase for their school and then also the strategy. So take a look at the last column. This is from 2021, 2022. In the district, pre-data, we had 89% of our students being fluent, knowing the stop signal and understanding the strategies of Expect Respect. And then with additional education, this past year, post-test was 94%. So what we've learned with our evidence-based programming is that it does take time, but we are hopeful that by sharing something at least on an annual basis with our programming year after year, that our students do become fluent in how to address these issues. Expect Respect, again, was implemented in 2019, 2020, but I wanted to share with you, this is some data that's actually reported to the state on actual bullying incidents along with our administrative response. So you can see that after implementation, there has been a reduction in actual bullying incidents. So for example, 2021, 2022, we had 2 students involved in 2 bullying incidents. What I can say is that we have quite a thorough process that's provided to our administrators on how to tease out conflict and bullying, and that our administration and counselors working together do a very good job in addressing these issues in the school environment. Here's some ways that our students can report any issue of concern as far as bullying or even conflict. There's the Speak Up app. Again, there's a bullying contact at every one of our schools that a parent or a student can reach out to. And then, of course, we have our administration, our counselors, and our teachers. To culminate a month of bullying prevention, we gave out wristbands in our school colors, K through 12, to students and staff. And we also sent home a brochure explaining the bans and also our strategies of Expect Respect. A recorded phone call was provided as well to make sure that parents were aware of what we were doing in the schools. And so we'd like to thank you for your time and for your support, and also provide you with your Expect Respect wristband. You do? You have 2?
Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you find parents receptive to the trying to explain? I know in the past I've heard parents talk about, oh, my child's getting bullied. I mean, do you find them receptive to the difference between this is just conflict when it's explained?
I think it does require a thorough discussion to help them understand that there are some differences. I do feel like bullying is a buzzword. It's easy to say that that's taken place, but when you can have a good conversation and kind of tease things out and help them to understand the differences, along with the support that can be provided, whether it is bullying or conflict, I think that makes a difference.
And have we seen a larger number in the last few years? I know some of those numbers may have been, although the online bullying
Sure.
with COVID, I mean, obviously those numbers could drop during COVID because they weren't really in school, but have we seen the number of children coming to seek help increase? Since
So I
2018?
think that's probably the concern we need to continue to work on. From the WireBS data that we obtained, what we understood from our students is that they're aware of what the resources are, but it's about accessing the resources. And so looking at the different ways to continue to meet our students' needs, whether that's technology or a different way to encourage them to report, getting kids involved as far as talking to one another, and the more that it's out there, I think it's easier for students to talk about it. We have to normalize that everybody deals with difficult situations.
All right. Thank you for your time
Thank you so much.
and the report. Item number 2.04, the 2023-24 registration guide, Mr. Riley. With some help, I guess.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members, Dr. Nicely. Of course, we're November 1st. We're only part of the way into the second 9 weeks, but the next school year planning starts really in the summer. We'll start looking at the registration guide. We'll go through this quickly, but just so everybody knows, this is something that we vet through all the supervisors. We take feedback from students, teachers, principals as we start to plan our instructional program for the upcoming school year. And what you have in board docs, if you go through the actual document, is there's a number of changes that are highlighted in red. In some cases, it's simple number changes. In other cases, we change co-requisites, prerequisites, based on feedback that we get from our students, teachers, parents, all our different stakeholders. We want to make sure that we're constantly refining our processes. We make sure that students can get the classes that they need to be successful. What we do want to mention is we've got 4 new classes that we're offering this year. The first one, and it doesn't look like it would be a new class, but actually English 9, I think we had it several years ago. It was removed from the registration guide, I think 7 or 8 years ago, based on what the principals said. The high school principals came and as we met, asked if we could put that back. We actually have 3 levels of English in the 9th, or in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade already. In the 9th grade, we only had 2 levels of English. They asked if we could put that 3rd level back. Talked with Mr. Legault, felt like it was appropriate. So that's one of the classes that we're adding back in this year is that 3rd level of English. So you would have a regular English, the college-bound English as that's designated there, and then your advanced English 9, which matches up with all the other grade levels. The second course there, actually this has kind of been in the works for a couple years. At Glenver High School, Dr. Franklin came to us a couple years ago. There's a graduate of Glenver High School who has been quite successful in Nashville, and as a result has kind of partnered with them. They donated a lot of equipment there at Glenver High School that they've been using after school in a variety of different ways, and what they wanted to do was offer a course using that equipment. So we asked them to kind of get with the VDOE, find out what that would look like, do some planning. And after a couple years of working with them, we're proposing to add a recording 1 class, an intro to studio recording. It would be piloted at Glenver High School, but one of the things we've asked them to do is to build out that curriculum so we would in the future have the ability to offer that at all our high schools. Now, of course, not all the high schools won't be able to afford the equipment that was donated, but the neat thing that this program offers is through some low cost, of course, it's all subjective, but things I think we could afford. Schools would be able to implement this curriculum using some fairly inexpensive software so students could do recording. Now, oftentimes you think recording of music and things like that, but it goes well beyond that into podcasting and all kinds of things that students can do. So what we're proposing this year is that they pilot this at Glenver High School. They're going to be building out this curriculum to share with the other schools, and the hope is if it's successful, we'd be able to offer it at the other base schools. The other 2 classes are in the CTE arena. That's why I asked Mr. Sir to join me to talk just a little bit about the other 2 classes and then entertain any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. Got radiology technologist, which we're currently running, so it's not a new course to the school division. We've partnered with Carillion to offer this year as a pilot. We have 5 students involved, but next year they've come on board. A recent conversation with them, we're going to triple actually more than triple the number of students in that program for next year. And we wanted to add this to the registration guide, needed to get it in there so students knew of the opportunity and can apply to enter that program. That will continue to be held down at Carillion for the time being. They provide that nice area. It'll probably be 3 classes of 6 students apiece next year. This year, it's one class of 5. So we're excited about the opportunities there for our students. And of course,
Just to clarify, am I correct in saying that's actually at the Korean Children's Building at Tanglewood?
yes, it is. It's right down there.
Be interested in hearing that.
It's a neat facility. They've done it up right, and our students get to walk into that professional environment and learn there, have some really good equipment to work with, have a great instructor provided by Carillion. So it's a great collaboration with Carillion Clinic. And the end result of that is that they should be able to sit for their limited rad tech license. So it's an immediate help to industry as the students move on, graduate. All 5 students this year are seniors. Next year, there'll be a mix. So
Are those 5 students, one from each high school?
actually, they are.
By coincidence.
It is by coincidence, but one from each high school, yes. The next program is the Navy program. Of course, you know, we're running that this year. We're just adding the second year to that. That, once it's fully blown out, it will be a 4-year program. Currently housed at Byrd, and with hopes and plans to move that to the new specialty center once it is up and running. So we would have that more centralized, eliminating some of the conflict with transportation and making it probably a little bit more appealing to some of the students from around the county. But right now, we have a real engaging and excited instructor. He's doing a great job, constant communication, building out opportunities for our students, and that's just the second year of the Navy National Defense Cadet Corps program, which, of course, it took the place of our Air Force JROTC program.
It's a great program. I met the instructor this week.
Senior Chief Perrin, he's a good guy. Yep.
Yeah, super guy.
May I just mention briefly, I was, my email to the board yesterday, I was mentioning at the Virginia Education Summit last week, which was with the members of the House and Senate Education Committees, actually had Senator Donovan, who's from the Chesterfield area, and our little group that we were presenting to, but she was very interested in our CTE programs and some of the ways we're innovating, and just to let you know that she said, look, anything she could help with as far as removing any barriers to entry to these programs for kids in terms of regulations and red tape, let her know. So glad to make that connection.
Absolutely.
She's amazing.
So that's the registration guide. Any questions?
I may have missed this, but the Navy program, is that offered to all students at any grade level?
From across, and we'll provide transportation to get them. Yep.
9 through 12.
Any
High school, high school.
That's what I meant, sorry, yes.
Right, of course, the grade level there is 9-12, because you have to take the first level.
10 to 12.
Ninth
10 to
grade. I mean, 10 to 12,
Yeah, okay, that's why I was
Right.
confused,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, because you would take the first level in 9th grade.
Gotcha, okay.
So next year, will there be 3?
That would be the plan.
That would be-
Gotcha.
Yep, continue to build it out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item number 2.05, compensation study introduction. Mr. Bradshaw.
I'm working my way around. I know you can hear me, but Chuck will yell if I start talking too soon.
What place are the Steelers in?
Okay, well, congratulations are in order. First of all, Mr. Chairman, for your Browns last night.
You just got a presentation about bullying?
No, that was probably well-deserved after all the years of the other way. So, Mr. Chairman, board members, Dr. Nicely, as you know, we're in the middle of a compensation study, and we're actually really thrilled to have Mr. Russell Campbell with us tonight from MAG Corporation. It stands for Management Advisory Group. That was close, okay. And he's done many compensation studies, and we're really pleased with what they brought to the table. So that's why we have them working with us this year. So I'd actually like to turn it over to Russell to introduce the program, answer any questions you all have, those kind of things, as we are, like I said, we're already moving forward with this. They have all of our data already, and we're in the process of it right now, so.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, I appreciate the opportunity to come up and talk about the study that we are in the infancy stages of putting together. As part of our effort with respect to transparency and making sure that the board ultimately is comfortable with the information we will come back with at a later date and time, we thought it was appropriate that we give you an overview, a little bit about my background as the principal who will be developing the study and the recommendations, a little bit about our company, but more importantly, talk about our process and methodology that we use to develop these type of studies. There are certain basic tenets that are not necessarily unique to Management Advisory Group, but any organization or individual in the business of designing compensation systems must address. With respect to my background, I'm a former Air Force officer. Once I transitioned out of the military, I went to work in local government as an HR director, eventually became an assistant city manager, and found myself getting in consulting about 5 years after that. I've managed and directed about 205 of these type studies. Probably a third of those have been school districts. I've worked in some small rural districts to large urban districts like Houston and Philadelphia. So we come into this engagement with no preconceived notion as to what we expect to find. I do know, and I will say, not because he's sitting next to me, but based on our initial review of documents and information that we requested so far, I genuinely believe you have a well-run HR operation here, and that's not always the case. So,
Thank you.
I think
I will.
Jim and his folks do a good job with that.
Pay him later.
Thank you, sir.
Make sure that's 2 10s. All right?
Yes.
And I want to share a couple of PowerPoint slides with you briefly. Our company has been in business since 2002. We started out in Florida, and over the past 25 years, we've worked in probably 41 states. Our clients are all government entities. We don't do any work for private companies. So our client base consists of school districts, cities, counties, utility operations, health districts, as well as public safety operations such as police, fire, and EMS. All told, the principals in the firm have conducted about 600 of these studies over the past 25 years, including many here in the state of Virginia. And that's just kind of a listing of some of the organizations we worked for in the state. We've done work for cities, schools, as well as counties here in Virginia. The scope of services associated with this project we took from the request for proposal that we responded to. Everything we do will be done in interface with the district's project coordinator, which will be the HR staff and Jim's team. We're in the process now of reviewing the current structure, some of the history and goals of the organization. For example, we know it's been about 3 years or so since your last study. We've been looking at what type of salary adjustments you've given over the past couple of years. We've been reviewing your salary administrative guidelines and policies. And of course, we'll be looking to bring best practices, ideas, not only in terms of developing a compensation study that's competitive and equitable across the board, but also provide policies and procedures that will support that with respect to determining where people start within the new salary structure. How does a promotion impact someone's pay, a transfer or demotion or a temporary job assignment? All those things require sound policies, and we will certainly provide best practices policies in those areas. When it comes to developing a comp and class study, the first tenet you have to adhere to is known as the internal equity review of the organization. And basically here, we're talking about establishing the internal relationships of the jobs within the organization under study. Not all jobs are paid on the same basis because some jobs require greater levels of duty, responsibilities, and qualifications, and there needs to be some type of mechanism to distinguish or rank the jobs within the organization under study. Now, we conduct a 14-point factor or criteria analysis on all the jobs that are non-teaching positions to establish that internal relationship. For the teachers' positions, because there is no value to be gained by determining whether or not a history teacher should be paid more than an English teacher, et cetera, the teacher scale is strictly indexed to the market. We look at what the other districts are paying, and we use that information to develop the new teacher scale with steps based on education. For the non-teaching positions, We do have the necessity for a number of reasons to make sure that we reward people or recognize people based on the value of the work they do, because there's such diversity of jobs in the organization outside of the teaching profession that we do have to apply some type of criteria to determine the internal relationships of the non-teaching positions. And so I'll share with you the criteria shortly, but just some of the things we consider as we build that internal relationship of the non-teaching positions. We look at responsibility in terms of duties and task, autonomy with respect to decision-making of the position, financial impact, people impact with respect to supervising or coordinating others. We look at judgment, decision-making, and a couple other factors where we go through a questionnaire that we're going to ask the employees to complete. And we assign a ranking from 1 to 10 in each one of those 14 criteria areas to build that hierarchical relationship so that I'll be able to print a report that shows me the internal ranking of the jobs in the district. I'll show you the highest scoring job, which we will argue will be the most complex, and then in descending order, showing you the lowest scoring position, which we will argue is the least complex position within the organization. We'll also do a market survey for the non-teaching positions as well, where I'm in the process of coming up with a list of employers, school districts, local, county, and municipal government, as well as the private sector from an aggregate perspective, and submit that to the district for review and feedback. And also as a part of that effort, we will also provide what we call the benchmark jobs, which will be the statistical drivers of the study. We do the job analysis on every position, but we do not market survey every position. We do a sampling. And in order to attach a confidence level that exceeds 90%, we have to sample at a minimum 20% of your job titles as a part of that market survey. In addition to collecting wage and salary information, we're also going to collect certain benefit items for comparison purposes to see where you stand with respect to benefit offerings to the employees of the school district. When we speak about compensation, compensation actually takes two forms. You have your direct compensation, which is your biweekly or monthly salary. Then you have your indirect compensation, which is all those other things that you do not directly see from a monetary standpoint, but there are benefits usually paid for on the behalf of the employee by the employer, such as time off, professional development and training opportunities, insurance, health, dental, disability, among other things. And so one of the things we're seeing in the marketplace, particularly after the COVID pandemic, is a greater premium is being put on those indirect benefits in terms of making sure that the workplace is becoming more of a place that's conducive to healthy living, not only at work, but outside the organization as well, trying to get that work-life balance just right. And so we'll be looking to see what are the creative indirect benefits other organizations may be offering with respect to work-life balance. We'll also, as we develop the new competitive pay structure, we'll make sure we're in compliance with the State Wage Act, which is going to carry or establish a minimum wage of about $15 an hour, I believe, in another year or so. And so we'll make sure we're in compliance with that going forward. And there'll be other recommendations. We'll look to see if people's job titles are commensurate with their duties and responsibilities based on what we typically find in the K-12 arena. And if we find some that are not, we'll recommend more appropriate titles for those individuals. We'll also look to make sure that jobs are properly classified with respect to the Fair Labor Standards Act, which governs which positions could be exempt and non-exempt for the payment of overtime. And we'll also be updating all the job descriptions as a part of the effort. And lastly, we will be looking at stipends, those things that are often paid for extracurricular duties such as coaching and other activities. We'll be looking to make sure that the district is competitive as it relates to those areas as well. I've summarized the steps in about 8 steps. I'll just quickly go through these. We're solidly in step 1, where we're working with Jim and his staff, and we'll be talking more with the superintendent's cabinet about goals, objectives, and mapping out the timeline. The next big step is step 2, where we need to engage the employees, explain to them the scope of the work, how to access the questionnaire, because it will be hosted on our server. They will log in using their employee ID number to complete that questionnaire. It takes about an hour and 20 minutes to do, but we usually give them 10 days to do it. And so we'll be talking to them about that. And we call these orientation sessions, where we explain what we're doing, how we're doing it, and walk them through that questionnaire. Step 3 is part of what I've already started, reviewing some of the issues with your current salary schedules with respect to. I've identified some positions where I can see that they've gotten behind the marketplace to certain degrees. Also, we need to make sure that we look at things like overlap between the teacher scale and the assistant principal scales and things like that. And so I will be bringing those things to the staff with proposals of how we're going to address those with the new schedules that we'll prepare. As I said, for the market survey, I'll be developing a list of what we call peers or competitors, as well as identifying the benchmark jobs for approval so that we can customize the survey and get that out. We're up against the holiday rush, getting ready to start here with Thanksgiving, so we want to go ahead and get that initiated right away. And then we start developing the new plan in step 5 by combining steps 3 and 4. And then step 6 will be the draft report, and I typically come back and present that to the work group that's guiding this project, give them a chance to go through it, develop their questions, and then I respond to their issues, concerns, and then we'll run a second draft, and then we'll meet individually with the leadership team, the superintendent's cabinet, to discuss those concerns with them relative to recruitment and retention in their respective areas. Then ultimately, we will bring a package to the board that will include new salary schedules, new job descriptions, FLSA reviews, recommendations on stipend adjustments where necessary, and then the overall financial impact of the recommendations. And then the last thing we're going to do in step 8 is we're going to provide the HR staff with a copy or a license of the software that we use to help maintain the study going forward. From a best practices standpoint, typically you want to do a comprehensive study every 5 years, but in the interim, you simply want to adjust the scales based on some type of index, either the consumer price index or the employment cost index, to make sure that the pay scales remain competitive until it's time to get to that 5th year, and then we reshuffle the deck all over again. This is a software application that we do the study in. And so I said there were 2 tenets. The first one is the internal relationship review. The second one is the market review, where you're collecting pay structure information from other districts and employers. And then we use linear regression, which is a statistical modeling technique that's programmed, that has an algorithm programmed into that software to project what a competitive salary structure should look like for this organization. Typically speaking, we have a goal of trying to get you to the 75th percentile of the peers in the region. We found that if we can get you to that 75th percentile, you should be able to recruit and retain across the board and be able to compete with any of the employers that have similar type positions. Here are the responsibility factors or the criteria we use to rank the non-teaching positions. There's 14 of those. These are universal criteria. They will apply to any position, whether it's management, non-management, exempt, or non-exempt. And so I go through and I have a grading matrix that has descriptors for me that's indicative of what a score of 1 would look like for a custodian versus a 10. Score of a 3 for electrician versus a 7. So as I go through the questionnaires, I can consistently grade the jobs, and that's how I establish that internal ranking of the positions within the organization. This is just a snapshot of the market survey. Once we get the data back, we'll create a small market report so that we can share where the district currently stands in the marketplace. And what we do is we develop a template, and we provide that to the other districts and employers. It has a brief description of the duties and responsibilities of each one of the benchmark positions here in the district, what the qualifications are in terms of certifications, education experience, and then we summarize which organization provided what their corresponding title was. And you'll notice we'll collect the information on their pay structure, not individual salaries. You cannot build a statistically valid pay structure by trying to use individual salaries from employees in other jurisdictions, because they would vary greatly based on how long they've been in that position, how long they've been with the organization, the policies that organization may have for advancing people through the pay scale. So any good statistician could pick that apart. It would not be defensible. But what is defensible is determining the value of the position via the salary range. And so that's what we'll be collecting information on. And then once we get that for each one of those benchmark positions, we can compare how the district falls relative to the market average compiled from the other organizations. We can compare from a dollar standpoint as well as percentage speaking to see how far you're off. In compensation, we use 5%, the 5% rule for a lot of different things. And one of the things that we found, if a single position is greater than 5% behind the market, that's generally a sign that you're probably having some difficulty recruiting, getting a applicant pool that's sufficient with highly qualified people. Also, retention could be an issue, particularly when someone has an opportunity to increase their income anywhere from 10 to 15%. They don't have to relocate. They just change the direction of their commute. So anytime we see that 5% deficit, that's an area of concern. And then when we get the entire study done and we look at the change in payroll, is it going to increase payroll by 4% or 5% or 6% to implement this new study? If that total implementation cost in terms of the change to payroll is less than 5%, well, that's a good indicator that the organization has done a fairly good job of managing compensation within its district in terms of not only maintaining competitive pay structures, but also making sure actual salaries are relatively competitive. And one of the things we're up against this year is inflation. It's still pretty high. I think sometimes our Fed wants to kill jobs and not create jobs, but that's a whole nother debate. But the interest rates, short-term rates are continuing to go up, which eventually it's going to impact the labor force, and we'll probably see layoffs, particularly in the private sector, in the late spring or summer of next year, unfortunately. But in the short term, when we're doing these studies, one of the things we got to be cognizant of, if we're going to develop a competitive structure and employees are going to be recommended for salary adjustments, we need to make sure that we anticipate what role inflation is going to play in those recommendations. Because if you're raising health insurance and gas is up and food prices are up, you really need to make sure you put a little teeth in any employee adjustments so they can really see something as a net result when you look at the prices and other things that are happening. So we'll be cognizant of that as we develop the new structure as well.
So can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So are you going to account for CPI? Is that, I mean, do you give
Yes,
different
yes.
structures for if this is the CPI and this is the, because
And
this
we
is
actually
this,
use both indices. We use the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and we use a more detailed index called the ECI, which is the Employment Cost Index. That measures from the employer's perspective the increased costs of compensation and benefits. So we look at those two indexes, which are published every quarter by the Federal Department of Labor. And so just in summary, to develop the study, you got to have the internal relationship, some criteria to rank the jobs, some type of tool to get the job information from the employees, i.e. questionnaire, and then externally you've got to agree on who you're going to compare the organization to, collect that data, review it, make sure you kick out any statistical abnormalities, and then use some type of computer modeling technique to mesh together the two sets of data to create the new salary scales. And then you can determine adjustments by individual, by budget fund, and then the cost for the entire organization. Some of the reports that we will be able to generate, this is what we call a pay plan report. This is where we provide our version of the proposed new structure. You'll see that in this particular report, and we run it various ways, it shows you each position on the left, the pay grade they've been assigned to, and then the salary range is an annual rate as well as an hourly rate. And then school districts generally have steps. What we do is we take that minimum, mid, and max, and we elongate it into 30 steps. And we'll place every employee in a grade and step based on how much time they've been in their current position with the district. And that's more of a costing report. And then there will be a summary report that shows you the entire impact to the organization in terms of adjustment to get those who are below step one to step one. If we do some type of general increase, that cost will be there. We'll identify those who are below step one and how many people that affects, and what it costs to get them there, what it costs to place everybody on their step, and what the new payroll will go to without benefits. And then, of course, we'll see the change to payroll. In this case, it was 4.8%, which is a good indicator because it's below that 5%. So I'm anxious to see what we have here. And just in summary, why we were selected, our extensive experience. Of those folks that actually sit and do the analysis, no one has fewer than 10 years of experience. When we do hire grad students out of school, they're fetching coffee. They're not doing client reports, I can assure you of that. And so you're getting knowledgeable individuals who've seen a lot and can add value in terms of best practices, guidelines, and policies to the district's compensation program. We work really well with HR staff. We communicate really well. Jim and I have had several conversations already. He's talked to our tech people as we're building a database with all your employee information in it. Our software, we provide a perpetual license to you. We don't charge you for that. It can run different type of budget scenarios in terms of if you increase employee pay by this percentage, what is that going to look like across the different fund balances? So we can run those reports through that software, which we'll provide and train staff on how to use it. And I'm always available in the event there are questions. We will be holding a virtual meeting next week, Jim and some of his folks, to talk about next steps, which is particularly important. As we get close to the holiday, we need to go ahead and decide how we're going to engage the employees to explain the questionnaire process and let them ask questions. And so we'll probably do a combination of on-site, someone from the firm will be here, the whole meetings, and then also virtually where they can log in and have a virtual briefing from one of our staff people. That is, in a nutshell, is what I wanted to share with you. I just want to kind of lay the groundwork so that when I come back, some of the things I talk about then will kind of trigger some of the things we talked about today, and make sure that you have all your questions answered, because in any organization you go into, 2/3 to 3/4 of the operating budget is tied to employee-related expenses, salary and benefits. So it's a huge cost, it's a huge investment. And as the caretakers of the district fiscally, I want to make sure you have all the information you need when we bring back that report. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to address those at this point in time.
Scott, one
Mr.
question.
Ray?
Russell, very thorough and comprehensive
Thank you, sir.
presentation. You mentioned indirect benefits. Could you give us an example of that?
Yeah, indirect benefits would be different types of paid time off, whether it be vacation time or
PTO.
sick leave. It would be the district bearing the costs for some individuals to get their certification, like national teacher certification, or going to some type of professional development program to enhance their knowledge. Those would be benefits. Car allowance, if anybody gets a car allowance or a vehicle, a district-owned vehicle, that would be a benefit. Other benefits could be in the leadership ranks, additional deferred compensation, retirement contributions. Typically, there's anywhere from a public sector organization of this size, you're probably looking at anywhere from 24 or more types of benefits. What we want to do is focus on those benefits that are core benefits among school districts, paid time off, professional development training and monies for those type of things, as well as making sure that what are you doing in terms of helping employees decompress from the job. Most organizations have what we call a EAP program, employee assistance program, where if you're having, you need counseling, things like that. there are some other things that are going on. Just quick anecdote, I was in Galveston, Texas last month. And I was sitting down talking to the clerk of court, very nice lady. And then I'm focused on, talking to her, and then all of a sudden, I feel something nibbling at my pant legs, and it's her dog. Well, once a month, they can bring pets to the job. So that's one of those.
That's an
those
indirect benefit.
Yeah. I'm afraid of dogs, so.
Mr. Hudson, sir.
This is more for Mr. Bradshaw. I know that, make sure we include our building manager, custodial staff, since we're having a hard time finding those folks.
Absolutely.
I know traditionally, we haven't been hiring any of those, so just want to make sure, I think what this gentleman's going to provide to us will be intuitive to us being able to
Yeah,
find
we've got an
somebody.
entire list, and I didn't tell you this, but it's myself, of course, Justin McClung, Susan, and Jody Lee, and then Derek is doing all of our technology work behind the scenes. Jessica has an entire list of things like that, and I've already made him aware of a couple of things, and of course, that's one I was looking at as far as building our building managers, custodians, how we can really entice them and make it more meaningful for them to come back to work for Roanoke County Schools. So he's aware of that. We've already talked about bus drivers, we've talked about some of those things, coaches. We've talked about some of those kind of things as well. He has mentioned PTO. I mean, that's one of the things we really want to look at is what does that look like for us? Because we do feel like that we need to restructure that and possibly our payout and those kind of things. So we're working on those things as well. So we do have a list. That is definitely on the list.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
And while we're on this
absolutely.
subject, Dr. Nicely, we can talk later, but if you'll just shoot me an email, let me know when that contract's actually up for renewal with SEC.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Campbell, your projected completion date on this? What do we have?
We've given him one.
They told me to bring it up today, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding. I expect to have the draft report early January, and then typically takes about 4 weeks to get to the final, once the draft has been presented.
Just
So-
be helpful when we get to budget
Yeah. We
season
know
to
that
make sure
he's
that we
well-
have
yes.
what we need to.
Yes.
Mr.
You
Campbell.
mentioned PTO. Are we going to look into offering that in lieu of how we do things now? Is that what you're saying?
We're gonna, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, we're going to look and see what the trend is right now with respect to most organizations, and I use the term old school, where we break out vacation time, sick leave, you have two separate banks of time. Well, over the last 5 to 7 years, there's been kind of an evolution where we go to just a lump sum of time, and you can take it whether you're out sick or out vacation. It's called PTO, paid time off. And so we're going to look and see, is that the way to go? If so, how much is fair and equitable from both the employer side and the employee side? And if we decide, recommend staying with the way it's currently configured, is the number of days in both banks sufficient? And then the buyback.
So that was going to be the second part of my
that's-
And
question.
just to
something
clarify,
we
you,
don't look
it would be sick time and personal leave for us. Vacation is a whole different thing, as you know. So yes, that, I haven't caught him up to speed on that,
Okay.
how our plans like that work. But yes,
So,
now to
so
your
on the
question.
sick days, when a person retires now, I just wonder if this is part of it. When a person retires now, if they have 100 days, 200 days, they get around $35 a day for that, which doesn't incentivize, in my mind, for people to carry those days over or to keep those. So what I've heard is that a good number of our folks take those days off as they go into retirement, and so I just wondered if.
Yeah, there's two ways to handle it, by the way, not to go off on a tangent, but you certainly can increase what the payout is at the end, when they get ready to retire or leave the district. Another option that that exists in some organizations is to help them not abuse it, but to incentivize them for not abusing it. They allow them once a year, usually around Christmas time, to redeem a certain amount. Those programs seem to be very popular because, some use that as a holiday savings plan. And so we'll look to see, is that a trend that a lot of others are using? Is there a cap on, one's ability to?
Be interested to know,
Yeah,
because right
so,
now, it's almost when you leave them, there's so
This is something that I'm passionate about too, and I've been looking at
so
as well.
discounted.
And it may not be at the holiday or Christmas time, because for us, we run obviously July to June, so it may be something for a summer vacation type thing, but the same type of an idea where people, if they have them, we obviously want to encourage them building sick time in case something happens, but
Sure.
at some point, when can I
Yeah,
buy back
how
some days,
much?
because I know I'm going on vacation. So those are things that we definitely want to look at.
Well, and a lot of them
are definitely in the study.
carrying those days, and they have long-term plans that.
That's right.
So it really counterproductive, to.
And
but
those
anyway.
are things that we really have to start being creative on, and I don't want to get off on a tangent either,
Yeah,
but, with recruit and retention, we've got to start being creative on ways to make it where Roanoke County, even if we're third in line as far as like a salary, this is still the best place,
Sure.
as far as the entire incentive package, so that's something I'm passionate about too, I think y'all know that, so every time I get up and speak about that stuff, so.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So I have two questions for you, and I don't want to go off the tangent either, but first, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. In the past, there's been some questions about our steps. Some schools divisions do 16, some do 30, and then retire. So I'm hoping that you've brought them up to date on some of that controversial stuff that we've dealt with.
Yes.
Okay, so yes, okay. And then you mentioned the surveys. They might take an hour and 10 minutes. What can we expect in terms of participation with the surveys?
Typically, when we ask employees to do the job questionnaires, we get about 60 to 70%
We do.
of the employee population to do them. From my standpoint, I need at least one from each job title. I'd like to get more than that, because for example, if I've got 20 bookkeepers and I'm going through all 20 questionnaires from 20 different people, maybe I find two, they're doing a higher level of accounting work, and so I need to propose a more appropriate title for those two, because they're different than the other 8. I can do those type of things when I have more than one from each job title, but as long as I have one, I can facilitate the review. And so one of the things we do, and no matter where you go, some folks don't like using technology, some folks don't like talking about themselves and what they do. So for those employees that are in the same job title now, and they're comfortable, that's not going to change, and they do the same thing, they could actually do it as a group effort. One person does the entry, the others sit around, chime in on the best response. And then there's a section in there where they can type in each person's name that was a part of the group. And so we try to do things like that. We work with Jim to maybe, if there's a conference room, set up a few computers, and maybe a couple of days out of the week, certain time frame, employees will be told they can come to the HR training room and somebody will assist them.
That's great, because participation is key.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? All right, we appreciate your time and information.
Thank you. Look forward to coming back with some results.
Thank you.
Dr. Stigall, item 2.06, recommended changes to policy 6.51. Welcome back.
This is in board docs, but we'll pass out hard copies. Can some of you prefer that?
Are you talking about me, Ken?
No, I think some people, I know I do.
I have my hard copies.
I know you do too. We're taking a quick break.
No, go ahead.
Oh.
Okay. All right, so we're taking a look at policy. The original policy was policy for high school graduation exercises. That name has been changed. We're recommending for high school graduation and commencement ceremonies. So if you look on the first page, you can see there's quite a bit of change there. Most of that is changing just a little bit of the language, changing some grammar, just cleaning it up a little bit. Nothing of content has really been changed on the first page. If you turn over to the second page, this is where the more meaningful changes have happened. If you look at number 3 on the second page, it says all students with a GPA of 4.0 or higher are declared valedictorians and are seated as a group and recognized in alphabetical order. Valedictorians are awarded a valedictorian medal. So we basically spelled that out because all 5 high schools are expected to meet that criteria. Also, number 4, That's the same there. Students who earn a 3.5 GPA or higher are designated as honor graduates and receive a gold tassel or cord. So those two things are consistent across all 5 high schools. Now, if you look at number 5, a little bit has been changed in the last sentence there. Graduation regalia, such as cords or pins for school honors or special programs, may be issued in accordance with the traditions of the school and as approved by the principal. The reason that change of language was there is we took a look at all the different honors that we have in schools. They vary across the 5 high schools, so we wanted to give them a little bit of ability to make those decisions by school. And then number 6 is a major change here. It says the primary purpose of commencement ceremonies in our schools is to recognize the honor students' accomplishments in earning high school diploma. Accordingly, all graduation regalia officially issued through the school may be worn at the commencement ceremony. Regalia issued through outside organizations or activities is not permitted. So that is a change that we're recommending for this policy. Any questions on any of that?
I have some comments.
Sure.
So, thank you for your work. I know that was a lot. So I went ahead and I looked at this sheet again. I know it was brief the other day. I did my homework, and I went back and I looked at gold versus yellow and the different organizations. And what I found was that actually they don't vary. There's not a lot of variability here at all, because gold is actually yellow and yellow is gold. It's in the eye of the semantic beholder. So if you go across and you look at, I have check marks on all of these that are consistent. Those are all the consistent check marks. The only difference is at Cave Spring High School, where they're giving out pins instead of cords. And so I looked into that also. My concern was, are we going to be giving out different color cords for different things, and is that consistent? It actually is. So if you are in the National Latin Society in Norfolk, Virginia, or you're in the National Latin Society in Tucson, Arizona, you get a purple cord. Same thing with, the Beta Society. The only difference with Beta is that on their website, the schools have the ability to order a white sash versus a gold collar stole versus a gold cord. So that's really the only other variability that I see. In terms of like the National DECA honors, it is actually a blue and white cord, because I looked that up. With the Tri-Music, it is a tri-pink cord. The only difference that I saw was the valedictorian, which you guys have solved, and the sports. So it turns out that, and I think this is a great thing, that over at William Byrd, they give a varsity athletics cord. And so there's actually, believe it or not, if you Google this or do your homework on it, you'll find that there's been some debate at some other schools, because student scholar athletes want to be recognized for their hard work, and a lot of athletes do put in 20-plus hours, could be, of time on the ball field or football field or the tennis court. So those athletes, if they're academically distinguished, they feel that they should be recognized. And I agree with that too. So my recommendation would be that we actually try to unify this and make it more consistent across our school, and not allow our principals to define what our consistency is. And my concern with that language here, Rhonda, is at the discretion of the school principal. And I went ahead, I looked at various colleges and academic institutions and divisions, and they spell out quite clearly what their organizations are that are approved. So if it's, your Latin Society or this society, what's distinguished, and then how they're going to recognize them, whether or not it's through cords or stoles or medals. Nobody mentions pins. I know that principals do want to keep a tradition, and I hear your argument on that. I think that's great, and I think traditions, there's a wonderful place for that. My suggestion would be that we as a school division come up with a unified, consistent policy, so we don't have one principal that comes in at some time and says, we're not doing any awards. Because if you can't give an award to everybody, nobody deserves an award. We don't want that. So if somebody does want to keep the tradition of giving a pin, that's great, but they should stick with the consistent guideline of giving out a cord for those organizations that we have approved and with the approved regalia for that organization.
Mr. Ray?
Yeah, I agree with the consistency that Ms. Fasciani has brought forward. I think that, when it came to me as or as an issue, I guess it would be, then it was like, okay, you can't have that. So to me, that was saying, well, but we want this. Well, I know there's tradition, and I agree. If you want a pen, you have a pen, and you have a cord. You go with that. There would be, whatever. And if it's athletics, then, it would be athletics that we would have. But I like the consistency that we would have, and also that we would provide that opportunity, for the cords, if they wanted to traditionally continue to do something extra that was tradition, then that's fine as well. But I like the consistency across the board that we would have rather than, who's going to make that decision at this time? And is it going to be consistent with the rest of the schools in the district?
So currently, just to remind the board, and certainly we can go in whatever direction the board desires. So currently, with the specifically the content honor societies, just Hidden Valley and Cave Spring do those. So there's that. William Byrd is the only school that does the athletic cords.
Yeah,
So I guess the board, the direction we would need is, do you want to adopt a policy that says, all 5 schools have to have, the content-specific honor societies, and therefore you do it this way? Same thing with athletic. That's the direction we would need to know in order to adjust it accordingly.
And I appreciate that, and thank you for bringing that up. I think it would be great to do, if it applies, if you have a Latin Honor Society and it's approved, not everybody is going to have a Latin Honor Society. And actually, it's quite shocking to me, and good on Hidden Valley High School and Cave Spring. They're the only 2 schools that have these academic honor societies. Our other schools should absolutely find the teachers as sponsors to have these academic honor societies. And it's not that these kids aren't high achieving at these other schools. It's really that we don't have a teacher who has said, yeah, I'll be the sponsor for that society. And if we want our kids to be the best that they can be and distinguished, and on their college applications, work applications, job readiness, these are honors that they should be recognized for.
So is that the case, we don't have a teacher to sponsor at those schools, or does it have something to do with socioeconomic levels?
Well, I would assume you'd have to have a sponsor, there's a cost involved.
There is. Each kid has to pay their initiation fee into the organization. And then you have to have a sponsor who's willing to do it. They have to follow the bylaws of the organization. So
Do we pay for that at the other 2 schools?
No.
No. So if you decide to join the Latin Honor Society, it might be like $20. So the argument that's been brought up in the past is, well, not every kid can afford to join the Latin Honor Society. My position on that is, darn it, if our kid can earn that and achieve that, we better find a way to find that $20 for that kid. No Honor Society child who can qualify for that should not be allowed to participate in that Honor Society because they don't have the $20.
Right, that's my concern.
Yeah, and I talked to my principal about it, and he said, I absolutely agree, and if that was the case, it's never been brought to my attention, because they have all these honor societies, absolutely would make sure that that kid could be a part of that honor society.
Well, you would at Cave and Hidden, but you need, and when we get to the study, and I agree, I'm okay, I'm not trying to argue that point, but when we get to the zone adjustments and you see that's the reason I asked for the Excel spreadsheet to kind of color code where the economically disadvantaged folks are at. There are not as many opportunities, I believe, for 3 of the schools as there are 2 of the schools. And so that's my only concern. As long as we fund it, find a way to fund it, you know, if one of these other three districts want to do that, I'm okay with that. But I don't want to see something created that kids can't be a part of because they
So all the organizations that are listed, DECA, FBLA, even Try Music, some of them do have fees to be part of those honor societies. That's just typical. But again, if we ask the principals, if you offered these, how many of those kids would qualify, meet the requirements, and then would come to you and say they don't have the money? We should be able to, the PTA, the school, the budget should be able to allow those kids to receive those distinguished awards because they've worked for it. And it would be a shame not to.
This goes, and this is going to go off just a little bit. I'd love to get the breakdown on the governor's school again, the number of kids from each school that we're paying for to go to that, and how that breaks down by school. So if we could get that at some point. If they want to include those, I don't want to change the system to where we have to worry, and we talked about this, about worry about outside organizations coming in. I mean, if they want to, I'm assuming add those. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, I
Amy?
think this would be a situation where we should come together as a board and decide which of these organizations should be approved, distinguished award organizations that should be recognized, because maybe you feel, Tim, that sports shouldn't be recognized, maybe somebody else feels it should. Now, I personally, I'll tell you right now, I think it'd be nice to have a varsity scholar award where the varsity scholars, whether or not you want to set that GPA for a 3.0 or 3.5 or what have you, or maybe some schools have these varsity scholar awards where the kids are 4 varsity sport participants, or maybe they're 2 out of 3, or, I mean, so that'd be something that we should discuss.
Well, I think, the consistency in what you're saying is consistency across the board rather than some, you got it, you don't have it, you don't have it. And this way, I think if we were more consistent in the way we established this, then it'd be more equitable in that standpoint. That, yeah, they're giving them over here, but they're not giving them over here. And then you get, okay, well, why not? You know, why aren't we doing this? So.
I will tell you, we've been on this discussion for 10 years now. And so over the time, principals cannot come to a consensus because of their traditions and their belief systems. And so some schools have gone out on a limb and created some things that other schools have not. So when you make that consistency decision, just remember that some people are going to have to add to and some people are going to have to take away. So that's going to change their procedures for graduation. So you just need to know there is more than just one change. There's quite a few changes in there that would have to be made in order to be consistent.
I'd like to hear from our principals.
We did.
We did.
We did. They want autonomy.
Who did?
Rhonda
Yeah,
did.
we met with them twice on this topic just this year. They want to have that flexibility because when we did the chart, went over the chart with them, and they had discussions among themselves, for example, you know, the athletic, only one school does that, the others do not. None of them had any desire to make any changes. Knowing that and it's the same reason, because if we were to go consistent, some people are going to have to add to and some people are going to have to take away in order for us to be consistent, and they wanted to stay status quo.
Well, I talked to Josh Whitlow about the varsity athletic thing just yesterday, and he had no problem doing that. So, I mean, I think we're running into a rabbit hole here where if we have a principal that goes rogue, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. With the 504 plan that I have for my kids throughout Roanoke County Schools for type 1 diabetes, I was perfectly content with all the administration that was in place at Cave Spring Elementary School. Jody Poff was fabulous. She never questioned anything that I asked. However, if Jody left and something happened, and I ran up against an administrator that said, sorry, Cheryl, your daughter can no longer go to the bathroom when she needs, she can no longer eat a snack when she needs, she can no longer prick her fingers when she needs, I was going to be up against a rail. So you want these policies and guidelines in place, and if you look to all the other academic institutions, there's a reason why they've implemented these, so that you don't have somebody that comes in and says, no cords for anybody. You know, so I think we have to be consistent, and if we're not, it's really could end up being a clown show. So that's, you know, yeah, is it going to take a little bit of work? Sure, but what worthwhile doesn't take work?
I like to hear from our principals.
I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from our principals. I'd like to hear from
I think common sense kicks in, and I love, I mean, the traditions that are there, I don't know that we'd ever get a principal that would come in and deny all cords personally. I mean, it's a situation where I think it works. There are different things go on at different schools. I mean, I know that there's a knighting ceremony over at Cave Spring, and you've got, I mean, the schools just have traditions that I think need to be recognized and need to be considered in this situation. And I think we're getting them personally maybe a little heavy-handed if we try to get it into one-size-fits-all situation with this person.
Well, the example you use, I mean, schools do that. At night, they might have their mascot and things like that, but that's not a graduation thing that you're going to say, hey, you get a special award for being graduating as a knight. But I just think that, if we're not going to come to agreement in some ways, then I feel like that we should be doing cords, and if they want to do pins, they can do pins as well. But I just think that to be consistent with the other schools that are actually doing the cords. So I feel that we should be doing that.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. And to your point, David, I don't think that we're talking about a night or taking away. The only thing that's different is maybe the Hidden Valley High School has the Titan 12 and they wear a white stole, so that might have to change further because the Beta kids wear a white, actually it kind of looks silly to be honest with you because the Beta kids wear a white stole and then the Titan, so it's a double white. I mean, I thought a lot about this. The Beta club could go to a yellow, which is on here, so we're not asking that the traditions be erased. We're saying let's bring consistency to it so that you don't have so much latitude for any one principal at any given time to come down and say, we're not doing this. If they want to give pins, but there should be a set policy and a set procedure of what the regalia should be, and it's already set. I mean, these National Honor Societies have set colors that they give and set stoles. It's just a
My
matter of
understanding
implementing
is
it.
current policy, I mean, they could do both pins and cords?
They can, of course, they're purchasing double.
The students will purchase them.
The students,
Or which they prefer, right.
yeah.
I think that's, my understanding, that's what Ms. Dees is doing at Cave Spring, is going to the students and saying, what do you prefer? But, so I
So
guess.
that's great, but what happens when Ms. Dees isn't there and there's another principal that's there
Right.
that says, you get nothing?
So I guess as far as coming back with, a different version of this, what I'm hearing is, several options. One could be, if you do have, various honor societies, we can word that however, is most appropriate. You must issue a cord and maybe even go so far to say, according to the color designated by that organization or something to that effect. That'd be one, way to do it. And so it kind of leaves it to where the other schools, can have whichever organizations they want. Another way to go would be to say, as a board, we insist that all 5 high schools have these organizations and do it that way. So we just need some marching orders in terms of what to come back with.
So let me ask Cheryl, so are you saying there's something they're not doing at Hidden Valley that you want them to do?
No, this is really just one school in particular that is, if you look at your sheet, that's giving out pins instead of, in the absence
I
of
know that.
cords, right?
And so are those kids?
Those kids
wanting-
are upset, oh, yeah, and the argument that they heard was it's not equitable.
I got a lot of calls from parents.
These aren't even
Well, I'll
my
leave that
kids and
up.
I'm getting
I mean, if
calls.
that's, I'll leave.
But I thought that
to
had
me,
been
that's-
addressed, and that is
Yeah.
being
I'm sorry.
corrected.
Tim was talking.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Mike, if that's the way, that's your school, if that's how you feel.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case and they want this or they want that, then I think we ought to provide it. So whichever way they want to go.
So what Ms. Deeds has done is she's gone to every one of those organizations, and she's turned it over to the sponsors to talk with the kids to determine as a group what they would prefer, and then that's what they're ordering. So what you're going to see is some may say they want pins, some may say they want cords. So you're still going to have potentially some
Right, so we're not
lack
really,
of consistency.
we're really not
but-
consistent.
Yeah.
So when you give it,
Still.
when you pitch it and punt it to the kids, I understand why you want to do that. But, I can tell you at Virginia Tech, where they have a policy for regalia, they don't punt it to the kids because kids would show up in anything. And there's a standard in place for a reason. So I mean, I'll just tell you, Ken, because you asked, I mean, you could have something written like, Roanoke County Public Schools recognizes our students' commitment to excellence and symbols of excellence that are used to distinguish individuals for their academic achievement. The wearing of approved graduation regalia, i.e. cords, sashes, stoles, and medals during commencement, is reserved for academic honor societies, distinguished academic honors, valedictorians, and scholar athlete award recipients. The following student organizations are approved by blah, blah, blah. And then those are the organizations that are approved, and those are the guidelines, and that's the regalia that they can have. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, so if you do it that way, but you would want to specify that it has to be a cord.
Well,
Not medals and everything
well,
else.
so for
right?
each organization, like when you go to the website for the National French Honor Society.
Each one's different.
It's one cord for them. If you go to the Tri-Music Honor Society, it's a tri-pink cord. So they're set up already, they're already standardized. The thing that's inconsistent in Roanoke County Public Schools actually is that not every school has these societies, and that's okay. But if you have that society and you have kids participating in the society, they should be honored if that is an approved society with the proper regalia.
Maybe as recommended by that national organization
Perfect.
or what have you.
Yeah.
Is that?
I mean, just a list.
Well, so the question is, do we actually want to list the approved organizations?
I think that would probably be the safer bet.
That way you don't get Tom, Dick, and Harry organization. I mean, these should be approved, distinguished organizations. And then the last piece of the puzzle would be the varsity scholar, which I would support, and then we would
William
have to
Byrd does
poll.
all, it's not tied to scholarship, it's just all athletes.
Or
so-
all athletes. So do you want to put an academic stipulation on that?
I would
Requirement?
defer, I would want to talk to Tammy.
Yeah, talk to Tammy. You want it to be a 3.0 or a 2.0?
She's gonna wanna keep it the same, but right now it's you participated. It's not contingent on grades.
Okay.
But you were talking about doing something extra.
Well, different, you know what, I'm open to this. I just think you should need to honor your varsity athletes. They put in a lot of time.
Sure.
And,
But I don't think I have to tell her how to do that. If we do it with a scholar athlete cord or however that's, I mean, I've obviously been there and participated, but, and she recognized them during the ceremony, which is pretty cool. So, if, you know, as long, here's the deal for me. If that's what Mike wants, I'm good with that. I just don't want it to, because I haven't talked to Tammy about this. And I don't want to change anything she does, because I'll tell you, when we go in that graduation ceremony, you know, when you come out of there as a terrier, you want to thump your chest. You know, I know it can sound silly from an almost 60-year-old man, but that's the kind of excitement she creates in there, and I don't want to change whatever she does.
And I think you can still create that.
Yeah,
I
as long
really
as we
do.
don't change it, I'm good.
Yeah, I think you leave the traditions.
You leave the
Yeah.
tradition.
And just make an approved list of what you were talking about.
So, just to clarify, so would the operative verb here be, you know, you may recognize, and if so, you're gonna do it this way, versus you will? In other words, for example, go back to the athletes, you know, all 5 high schools will start doing that, or we're gonna say will, and all 5 high schools are gonna have those honor societies? Or is it that if you have those, right, you may have, these are the ones you may have, and if you do, you're gonna honor them with a cord? Which of those two sounds closer to what you're thinking? If I'm getting clear.
Here's my thinking. I mean, we obviously had some issues with Cave Spring and Hidden Valley. Word gets out that, oh, over at William Byrd, every athlete gets a cord. And then we're gonna start hearing from Northside and then Glenver and the other schools, hey, why don't we get cords? I mean, you're opening up a can of worms, in my opinion, that.
So it should be consistent, though. So
It's only for
So
the
you gonna
approved-
tell Tammy she can't do it?
No,
Absolutely, I'm not.
I think
I'm
as a
gonna let
board,
one
we
of y'all
come
do it.
together and tackle the varsity cord thing. You know, is this something do you want to make it, I don't know, what's Tammy's requirements? Do they play one varsity sport, 1 letter, 4 letters, 2 letters? I mean, who knows?
I don't know. I'd have
We
to
probably
ask her.
have to
That's
find
why
out
I
that
asked if
information.
we've talked to her.
Yeah, it's if they're on a varsity sport.
Any varsity sport.
But I mean, that could even fall into the tradition part that we're talking about. Each school has traditions that we don't want to take away. That's a tradition at Byrd,
That's just-
so there's no
Right.
need to touch that. You're
Right.
literally just asking, and I think to clarify with Mike, you're just asking for certain parameters for kids to be able to be recognized with cords.
Yeah.
So,
And if that's, I know tradition was the pins. I know it would be double. I don't know, but I mean, that's, if they want to keep the tradition, but, I've heard from a lot of people about cords, and why can't we have that? Why can't we be like somebody else that has cords, or anybody that has cords? And I think that should be the opportunity. And if they still want, as we said, tradition, and if they want that tradition, then so be it. I mean, as far as.
Let me ask it this way. Could we say, whatever you do, it has to be cords instead of pins? I mean, I'm just asking. I don't know.
Well, but.
That's not my school.
Yeah, I know, but you take away that tradition if that's what they want to do, but it would be up to them to do the double cost, and say, okay, we will do pins because of the tradition, but we're going to do cords.
Okay, you want to do both.
If they want
If they
it.
want. I
If
think
they-
this has brought up a really excellent, I like this stuff. I like to see data. I like to see where we fall. I like to see where we fall compared to other divisions and what's the flavor out there. And it was really eye-opening to me that we did not have a consistent guideline, recognizing consistent associations or having consistent regalia that we said was matched that. I also thought it was interesting that only Tim's school was the only one that recognized their varsity athletes. And personally, I think that's excellent. You bring up well, who knows, you're going to get 25 phone calls for the varsity athletes. Well, you should. That school should be recognizing the varsity athletes. But you want to make that a scholar varsity athlete, you have to have a 3.0 and participate in 2 sports or 3 seasons of a varsity sport, or one school even had 2 to 3 seasons, and you had to participate in a varsity sport your senior year. Because a lot of kids, by their senior year, they're like, forget it, I'm not going to. So in order to get that honor, that distinguished award, they may just go ahead and participate in a sport their senior year. So anyway, there's lots of discussions that we can have on this.
So let me kind of say one more time what I think I'm hearing, and y'all just have to give a thumbs up, thumbs down in terms of we're getting this right. So what I think I'm hearing is the policy should say, these are the things that may be recognized, and we can actually list out Latin Honor Society and so forth.
These are the
and
approved,
athletics, right?
I think approved organizations can, the approved.
And now, athletics is not the only one, okay? So there's probably 5 or 6 of them. There's Teachers for Tomorrow. One school recognizes those, the others don't. There are student leadership groups. Schools recognize, others don't. So there's more than one. There's a couple other ones that schools are going to have to go without because they're not going to meet the muster, right? They're not going to meet the muster of making that list.
I understand what you're saying, but what, if it's an approved deal, then it's not like they have to if they currently don't have them. I mean, if the school doesn't have one of those teachers for, as you said, tomorrow?
That's right.
If you don't have a teachers for tomorrow, I don't see a need to force a school to do that.
No, but what I'm saying is if it's a national organization and has criteria, these other things don't have criteria. And I think it would be hard for you to create criteria for some of these. But there's 4 or 5 of them that will be knocked off the list. But, I mean, that's a decision you have to make.
I have to know what those 4 or 5
They are
are.
currently being recognized.
And they're currently being recognized with a cord or pin?
Yeah, so Student Council Association, is that a national organization? That
It's
one.
just our student.
So Student Council Association, their cords are directed at the color of their school.
Right.
So Hidden Valley's blue and gold, you would get blue and gold cords. Turns out that Hidden Valley doesn't even recognize their student council. Yearbook was another one that was a little
Yearbook's
like
one.
questionable to me. I was like, wow, we're giving kids cords for yearbook.
Well, that's pretty.
I don't know.
That's pretty
It's
special.
not a national organization.
I
you
know,
know.
but that's
But it's
you
much
tell a
common
kid.
as a varsity
You
sport,
tell a
though.
kid that
Right,
does
right,
that kind of
so-
work that
so
they're
what you
not
do-
getting a whatever.
Yeah, I know, I'm just telling you, I thought, oh, wow, I didn't know that. So it would be interesting to come together as a subcommittee or committee, figure out which one of these we want to, maybe check back with, you could look at the checkbooks and the checklist and say, oh, well, so Glen, Cave Spring, I'll tell you who, the only person who does give cords for high school is Hidden Valley and William Byrd. I'm sorry, for yearbook. The other ones don't do it, so maybe they
Well, I
should
can
do
tell you,
it. I
we
mean-
take sketches as I don't even know if that's not the yearbook, but sketches is another. I don't know if she gives cords for that or not, but that's
That's a literary magazine. That
right that comes out.
Black Swan is your
Right. Yeah, Black Swan,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, thank you for the help.
Yeah, the only two, Rhonda, that I saw were yearbook, student council, marketing and business specialty. That's north side. You guys give an orange cord. Do they have a specialty center at north side for?
They,
No.
no, I don't know what
So
that's
I
for.
don't, marketing and business specialty center, I have no
Oh,
idea.
that's a bird, or was a bird.
Oh, well, it's, the checkbox is under
Part of the
north
DECA
side.
program?
That's probably a mistake.
Okay, here's one that I don't think should be on there, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I don't think we should, that's,
We started to get into clubs, right, versus
Right,
honor
right.
societies
Exactly.
versus yearbook versus
Well, let me tell you,
sports.
Fellowship of Christian Athletes of Bird's huge.
well, they don't
Young
give a
Life
cord
is
for
becoming-
it.
We're gonna really start going down a rabbit hole we don't want to go down in a minute.
But Ken, Tim, to my,
Get back to what we had here.
Do members of the band get a cord?
That's another question.
members of what?
Band?
Band, right.
No,
Choir?
that's not on here.
I mean, where is it gonna end? If we,
That's, the choir, it's tri-M, the tri-M gets it.
Do we do like
If they do
award
like, I think
ceremonies?
it's probably like an honors choir.
That's a
So
honors
some of
choir.
this could
That's
be
like music,
recognized
chord,
in award.
band, all that, so those kids are qualified.
Absolutely.
One thing that
I
I,
understand.
Which
there's
is probably
only a
what needs to
couple
happen
members.
with
I mean,
a lot of.
band members, what if?
Right, I think there needs to be a separation because it's my understanding we do award ceremonies.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff can be recognized, the students can be recognized in these award ceremonies instead of graduation. But the most important, obviously, should be like you're talking about.
Distinguished awards.
So
You
there
don't
needs
want to
to be
water
a-
it down.
One,
So do we want staff to come up with a list that they recommend that they feel should be?
Why don't we come up with a list and let them come up with a list and see where we all fall?
well, I can tell you what my list is gonna be. It's gonna be whatever
Tammy
Tammy
list.
wants. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And because.
And
what
that's
she-
why we got back to
yeah,
what this is.
Let me just say,
Exactly.
look, you can look at me like I'm crazy.
No, I don't think you're crazy,
Oh.
but
Oh,
it's in direct correlation to what Mike is saying over here, is what Haley wanted over at Cave Spring is different from what Tammy wants.
Well, what
And now we're
happens
gonna
when-
force people to do stuff instead of letting them have some individuality.
yeah, look,
The tradition
That-
building, I think.
The traditions
definitely
is
needs
the
to stay.
individuality. What happens when you get a principal that comes in and says nothing?
We
Then what
find
are
a
you
new
gonna do?
principal.
That's
One-
why
one-
people have
a lot of this
guidelines.
started, here, as far as the pins and the cords, and I know, understand this, the value that we want the enthusiasm from the principals. We definitely want that when it comes to graduation, because they make graduation day. They're proud of it, they set it up, they do it right, and, they want the students recognized. Now, whether it be consistency in the form of consistency, but I think moving, we definitely have them, involved, of course, discussion, but what we, the whole issue was cords versus pins, and that was at my school. And I think that we should be offering the cords, and if the pins, now you pay to join the organization, right? But you don't pay to buy a pin, you don't pay for the pin,
You have to select which one.
select which one you
Right,
want.
pay for, is that
But-
part with the
It's
dues?
part of it.
Part of the dues?
Yeah, but I mean, you pay the dues to be in the organization. You don't pay to buy a $20 cord or a $20 pin. So, I think that, if that's what they, and then we got to figure out somewhere that if there's any traditions and consistency or whatever it may be, but if not, there are the organizations that would be recognized. But I think that to solve this situation that I have, then you need to say, okay, we're gonna do cords, and how much is a cord and how much is a pin? I mean, when you
and
buy
if
them
they're
in bulk.
paying for it.
Huh?
And if they're paying for it.
And if they're paying for it, in the right to be in that, I didn't see if they got a pin, they got a cord, why not get a cord? And then if they want a pin,
And I-
if that's the tradition.
I think that's what
No,
Rhonda had solved, is that
No.
Haley has agreed to do that. If they
Well-
want cords, they can have cords.
Well, that's the immediate.
I don't think so.
That's it, that's
It's
just
not.
it.
That's
right
just the
now.
immediate.
That's just,
That's right.
But
Well,
not the
here's-
whole.
Here's what I think she's trying to do. She's trying to get she has told me she has not heard from any students or any parents directly. She heard them at the board meeting, and she's been at all the PTO meetings and all the other meetings, and there was supposed to be a petition she was supposed to receive, never got it. So she's not hearing the volume of that we're hearing here. So she's not really sure what the temperature is, so that's why she's sending it back to the students. She wants to get a temperature of how many of the students are wanting to go in this direction. This has been a tradition that goes all the way back to Martha Cobble. So you have traditions, years and years and years of graduates who've received that pin. So she's not 100% convinced that that's what the entire student body wants. So that's why she's sending it back to the students and the organizations to get that temperature. She says she is willing to go any direction, it does not matter, but she's also concerned if she switches to cords, are the people who want pins now going to start complaining? So she wants to be very careful and get a pulse of the school. So that's what she's doing this year. And then she does not care one way or another whether they do pins or cords. She just wants to do what she thinks the student body wants to happen.
So my recommendation to her would be do both. Do both.
And that's what she's doing this
Yeah.
year.
And don't kick it to the kids. The
Yeah, I think you
students,
need to
just
do
do
both.
both and
And
Go with
if
the
they,
guideline.
if the tradition falls by the wayside later, then maybe. But do both now and it's done.
And I will say, speaking, having kids that are currently in the schools, kids don't want to go to a principal. And so when any principal says that, well, I didn't hear that, I didn't hear that, yeah, you're never going to hear it. Because they don't want to come and complain. And a parent doesn't want to come and complain either. You know who they pick up the phone? They call their elected official. And that's why we're here. And we're supposed to serve the people.
And you can't get much complaints if you got both.
I went to the principal's office several times.
Well, we know that's easy.
Involuntarily there.
All right, we've discussed this
We've
plenty.
exhausted
When, in order to have this prepared or ready for next year's graduation, when does the decision need to be made?
I don't know when they order that stuff.
I don't either. It has to be early of the next year. I would say if we'd have it by January, we'd be okay.
Let us talk to our principals, I guess, and we'll discuss it some more.
We should discuss
I'm
that
asking
varsity
them.
thing
Ask them
too.
to
You
listen
know,
to it.
we should discuss that varsity.
As long as we
Maybe
move
that's a
forward.
tradition.
So here's what
What
she
Tammy
said.
say?
2 years varsity and must play senior year.
Okay.
Full season, only one cord, even if multiple sport athletes.
Okay, read that again. That's great. So she has requirements. One more
2
time.
years varsity.
2 years
And
varsity.
must play senior year. Full season, only one cord, even if multiple sport athlete.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
I think that makes sense.
You don't have a
So
bunch.
she doesn't put a GPA requirement on it.
No,
No.
no, I'm gonna ask her, but I don't think so.
All right.
All right, thank you. Item number 2.07, recommended new policy 6.62 on sexually explicit content in instructional materials to comply with state code.
think
Dr.
Mr. Riley's
Stigall,
gonna take-
Dr. Ms. Hogan, and Mr. Riley.
I think Mr. Riley's taking point on this one.
Oh, yeah.
He begged to do it.
Yes.
Do you like stoles or pins?
He doesn't even.
No comment?
There you go.
Thank you.
Gosh, you're no fun.
He was a principal.
That's right, he knows.
He knows to keep his mouth shut.
That's
He
it.
knows the right answer.
Of course, it's detailed there in board docs. This suggested new policy that we're bringing to you guys is a result of a change in the Code of Virginia in terms of how schools are expected to deal with sexually explicit content in their instructional materials. To help support schools in that, the Virginia Department of Education put out model policies. We looked at the model policy, and what we're bringing to the board is that model policy that they suggested. We've moved a few things around to streamline it a little bit, but it is pretty much verbatim. What the VDOE has put out is their model policy. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I will go over a few of the key components and then how we're going to go ahead and approach that as a division if this is approved and implemented. Of course, the purpose here is to establish clear procedures for schools to identify all instructional materials with sexually explicit content. 2, to ensure parental notification of any instructional materials with that content. Permit parents to review all those materials with the content. And then ensure alternative instructional materials that do not include that content and make sure that's provided in a non-punitive manner for any student whose parent so requests. So that's how we've aligned this policy. There's definitions here of all those different things. I won't go through that right now, but you can see those definitions of the different things that teachers will be looking at. If you go to the next part, it says the principal of each school shall establish in consultation and coordination with the school division instructional supervisors a process for identifying instruction materials that has the sexually explicit content. Prior to the start of any academic year, schools will identify those materials that include that content that might be used during the upcoming school year. Then they'll maintain a current list of those materials with sexually explicit content by grade and subject on the school's website. Of course, part of the policy then says parents need to be notified, so at least 30 days prior to the use of any of those materials, principals will provide a written notice to parents that identifies the materials, informs the parent of their right to review the materials, and informs the parent of the right to have their child use in a non-punitive manner alternative instruction materials that don't include sexually explicit content. And then we delineate how that should be provided. It needs to be in writing, either through mail, email, or in person at a parent-teacher meeting. And then, of course, schools are going to have available for the parent to review all those materials that include that content. Online access will be provided when possible. Of course, you run into copyright issues and things like that. So we'll be cognizant of that. Upon a parent request, schools shall provide, again, an alternative assignment. And parents may change their decision either way if they provide written notice to the school. What we've created to support this is an administrative reg, 6.62 AAR. Basically, it consists of a checklist that teachers would go through if there's material that they think might fall underneath this policy. In consultation with school and division leaders, they would go through this checklist to identify it. The teacher would go ahead and fill this out. They would go through their criteria. The first criteria would be, does it meet the definition of instruction materials? Is it a part of the instruction? If the answer is no, then they stop there. It's not a part of instructional materials. If the answer is yes, then they go down 2 through 6. And if they check yes for any of those, then it would have to be a part of the list that would go on the website. Parents would be notified 30 days in advance of the use of those materials, and parents would have the option for an alternative assignment for those right there. The teacher would go through that checklist. Having done that, the principal would review the checklist, make sure they're in agreement, they would sign off. And then finally, the instructional supervisor for that content area would also sign off. And if all three are in agreement that yes, it falls under that policy, then of course it's going to go on the school's website. We would notify the parents. If there are questions or concerns about anything, the point of contact here at central office at the director level would be myself. And we would make sure then that all of the Code of Virginia requirements are met through this policy. So that kind of in a nutshell is what we're proposing. Of course, it goes into effect, the code section goes into effect, I believe, January 1.
Well, what it is the code says that school boards have to adopt policies that comply with the model policy by January 1.
Okay.
I think what we would probably want to do with this is, in order to make sure we get all our pieces together with this, is maybe bring it at the December meeting to give teachers chances to think about what's coming up soon, because if you did it at the next one, they've already missed that 30. I mean, hopefully there's not a lot of things on this list, but you know what I'm saying? So I think probably the wise thing to do would be to bring it back December, just make sure we get all of our pieces together. But once you adopt it, it goes into effect.
Right. Questions?
Anybody?
Ms. Fachano, you'll be pleased to know that I was at the VAST conference this week, and they, in fact, used the abbreviation SEC as you proposed.
Sexually explicit content.
You remember that, Mike? Yeah, it's funny.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Item number 2.08, discussion of options for school attendance zone adjustments to balance enrollments. Dr. Stegall, you get all the hot topics.
Yeah, don't I?
Yeah.
I'll actually get us started on
Yeah,
this,
that's right.
just to give her a break. So Chuck, if you'll pull that up. And just, and we put the subtitle up there, just to be clear to everybody, you know, this is obviously just a preliminary report for discussion and consideration, but looking at adjusting our, you know, potentially our attendance zones. This is something, by the way, the Code of Virginia says you should do periodically, right? You should look at your enrollments in your schools and, you know, make recommendations accordingly. So this is not something that, as we mentioned earlier when Mr. Smith was here, you know, we don't build new schools every year, so we're not constantly adjusting the school, you know, school zones like places in Northern Virginia have to do, but it does come up periodically. So I've got the clicker. So just a couple of things. This is obvious for you guys as board members, but just to kind of remind ourselves and also for public consumption, you know, and I'm stating the obvious, Roanoke County has a unique geography. We're obviously this big donut or big circle. We've got these mountains between. I say that because, you know, along with concentrated areas of population, we've got some isolated areas, you know, such as out, toward Catawba and some other kind of places that are more isolated. Bonsack being kind of isolated geographically in terms of how you get there from Roanoke City to, to Botetourt. But those geographic constraints, you know, in terms of achieving perfect balance among our schools, you know, does those constraints do provide some challenges for us. But obviously, at all of our schools, and by the way, those little Roanoke County symbols on the map there are all 27 of our schools. Okay, where they're located, to kind of give you that graphic there. But obviously, we want learning environments to support learning for all of our students. We want to achieve balance to the extent practicable. Okay, again, given the geographic pieces. We'd like to avoid splitting feeder patterns, and we generally do that with a couple of exceptions. We generally like to allow students to remain in their current school to the extent practicable when we're looking at these kinds of things. And obviously, we want to allocate resources to align with our enrollments. So the adjustments that we're bringing to you for consideration are three. One is the shifting of approximately 100 students from Cave Spring to Hidden Valley over time to correct the imbalance that's there. We'll show you those current enrollments. We're also looking at possibly shifting some elementary students in the Vinton area from Condiff to Horn, and possibly and a similar number from Horn to Bonsack to alleviate those higher enrollments at Condiff, and of course with the open classroom concept being a pressure point. And then likewise, looking at why we're doing this, look again at our Masons Cove area. Given that that's the smallest school and also Glenver, our smallest secondary schools, is there any way to maximize the attendance there, given the small population there, but also future higher enrollment, and it's anticipated in the Glen Cove area. That's the purpose for those three pieces that we're bringing. This first piece has to do with the balancing of the Cave Spring and the Hidden Valley areas. As you know, the area that we're looking at for all of Green Valley Elementary School was previously zoned for Hidden Valley. So it was part of that, the last redistricting that Dr. Segal is going to kind of draw us to go through the history of that for us in a second. But those were, shifted. Green Valley was split as a result of that last redistricting. So currently Green Valley and also Cave Spring Elementary, as you know, are the two elementaries that split, and some go to Cave Spring and some go to Hidden Valley. In order to take care of that imbalance, we're especially given our administrative staff allotments and so forth, we're recommending let's rebalance Cave Spring and Hidden Valley, and possibly look at the William Byrd High School situation, possibly converting that dean position to an AP, just because redistricting there and alleviating that crowdedness, which is approaching 1,200, they're about 1,140 right now, is something that's difficult to try to do anything about, basically, at this point. And of course, it would make, if we did this, it would make Green Valley close to being completely aligned with Hidden Valley. If you look at the map right there, the piece that's Green Valley that's, I don't know if that's technically south, but below the Electric Road line right there, that's that area between Electric Road and Penn Forest Boulevard that's also Green Valley. We did not include that in this proposal, but those students do go to Green Valley, but also attend Cave Spring. So those are the current enrollments, and that's why we're bringing this as something to consider. If you look at the middle schools, the difference between the 765 and the 576 between Cave Spring and Hidden Valley, And then likewise at the high schools, the difference between the 1,047 and 828. If we shift about 100 students, and this is not a perfect process, right? I mean, you aim as a target here, but what you're aiming for is about 100 student shift, which would, if we did something like this, our long-term enrollment projection at the end of the rebalancing would get us to the numbers that you see at the bottom, which would be both of the middle schools in the 600 range, and both of the high schools of the 900 range, which by the way is about the same size as Northside as well. So you'd have all three of those schools in the 900 range if we were to look at doing something like this. And again, we'll have Dr. Stigall kind of remind us in terms of what the history was of the last balancing, because part of this is, you can say, yeah, we need to do something. The trickier part is how do you get there in terms of your timing.
It takes time.
How long do you string it out? Which students, do you affect and that kind of thing. Big decisions that obviously affect people. That's often the harder piece of this. This is the second piece, which was looking at, possibly shifting some students from Condiff over to Horn, and then likewise shifting some students from Horn to Bonsack. So again, the goal there is to alleviate the higher enrollment at Condiff with the open classrooms. And again, just to restate, this is only under consideration, and there's usually a process we go through as far as hearing from folks and that kind of thing. But the most logical place to look in terms of the current Condiff district is the area around Spring Grove, which is the part if you're looking at the front of William Byrd High School, it's the area immediately to the left. That neighborhood does have an outlet, I believe, Mr. Greenway, up to the Mountain View Road. And everything else around that is already at Horn. The other place, if you wanted to go a little further, would be to the right of Byrd, above in the Stonebridge area. That does not have an outlet right back to Mountain View, but that would make those basically contiguous if we wanted to look at something like that. Currently, there's about 49 students at Condiff in that Spring Grove area, and about 40 in the Stonebridge area.
So you're saying between the two, it could be approximately 89?
If you combine those, right. Again, this is not a perfect science here, but that's the current enrollment. It's just kind of based on what you currently have.
One thing that, and I'm sorry, I just want to throw this in because I sent this to my folks as well, just to get their thoughts. And keeping in mind the pre-K students, we need to kind of keep in mind what that would be in each.
Siblings.
Yeah.
It's already in the system.
Yep. So, we've got, one thing for whatever reason, we don't calculate, I don't guess the state pays us on pre-K.
Yeah, it's not the AADM, right?
But those principals have IEPs for about half those kids
Sure.
still, even though, we don't count them, we don't get credit. Yeah, and I mean, it's a huge burden.
And we get preschool funding, it's just not through the ADM.
No,
It's a huge
It's not part of,
task.
students' budget.
Much more.
It's just part of it, but.
No, it's a good point. All of our elementary schools, they all preschool programs, and yes, that's part of what they manage as well. Absolutely.
And it takes up space.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And we have the larger ones because, our population, which is good, that, they use them.
So in terms of possibly shifting some students to counterbalance that, really in order to look at anything in the Horn district, and everything of course is within the town of Benton pretty much, but the area that would make most sense to consider, and I know the map's kind of small, but if you know where like King Street comes out before you actually get across the bridge into the town of Benton, there's that area around what's known as Midway or the 8th Street area over there that you think you're in Roanoke City, but you go back far enough on King Street, you're back in Benton. It kind of just dovetails around. And then if you look at that green area over to the right, that says Roanoke County Career Center. That's the old William Byrd High School, which is currently those Billy Byrd Apartments. That's no longer the RCCC, but that Highland Avenue, that's all, I actually have a friend who lives on Highland Avenue. He said that's on that side of the railroad track. So the railroad, the bridge runs right there, going over into Benton, but that is part of the town of Benton over there. So the numbers we're presenting would be taking all that into consideration, Highland Avenue, and then all the area around what's known as Midway over near 8th Street. And that's about 53 students who live in that area. so in order to get the bond sack, what you would typically do, let's see, that orange line that you can kind of see in the upper right-hand corner sticking out, that's King Street. So that would be a straight shot. That's a pretty good road back out to the bond sack area. That's about 5 miles. I did the Google thing. It's about a 5-mile trip, which is, we have a lot of students who go there far and further. So certainly not, something that would be too bad in terms of travel. In terms of resulting kind of an enrollment adjustment, so again, the top line are the current enrollment. So Bonsack is currently at 320, definitely a building that's underutilized. Horn currently is at 399, Cundiff's currently at 489. The reason I listed those 1s and 2s, it would be the resulting enrollment. So 1 would be if you just did Spring Grove, then the basic resulting enrollment would be 395 at Horn. If you did Spring Grove and Stonebridge, you'd get up to 435. That would actually become a little larger than Cundiff because they would be at 400 if you did both, 440 if you just did the Spring Grove area. Moving the students from that Midway area and the Highland Avenue area I mentioned before, we'd get Bonsack up to about 373 by the time you add those 53 students.
What we got to be careful of is Horn is much smaller footprint.
Yeah, I listed the square footage there exactly. So then the approximate capacity. Yeah, their capacity is rated smaller than Cundiff for sure. And then the third shift is a minor one, but while we were looking at this, it just sort of made sense to bring it up. We just recently, and again, Dr. Segal will go over the history here in a second to kind of remind us how we did it before. This is actually the last redistricting we did was involving Glen Cove and Masons Cove, and that was basically most of the students on the other side of 81. So if you go out,
Timberview.
What's the neighborhood there, Mr. Hudson? I'm trying to remember.
No, I know what you're talking about.
We're going up the hill. There you go, Laurel Woods. There you go. So that whole area used to be Glen Cove and went to North Side, and we actually had a really good process. So we took the parents out to Masons Cove. Hey, look at this brand new school. Took them out to Glenver, and that was a pretty smooth process in making that adjustment. What we did not include was anybody on this side of 81, and that gets a little dicier because you're getting closer to Glen Cove. The reality is, though, that Masons Cove is still, still our smallest school. They still have capacity, and so we wanted to look at just the retreat apartments over here. Also, in view of the fact they're getting ready to build more apartments down here at Peters Creek and Cove, which is going to add to Glen Cove, and again, thinking of future construction. We're just trying to think ahead. Currently, that only involves about 12, 13 students that are currently enrolled there, but that would just grow over time. So for just long-term purposes, we wanted to bring this to your attention for consideration. All right, and I'll let Rhonda go through, just walk us back through the last time we did it in redistricting. Here's how we did it.
Yeah, so here's what we did in South County when we redistricted the secondary schools. So that the board made the decision in May of 2010, and so the implementation wasn't until 12/13. So, which gave some time for the planning and getting the information out to the community and getting feedback. So what the situation was is it was overcrowding at Hidden Valley High School. They were past 1250, so they needed to move some students over to Cave Spring. The stipulations that were in place during this move was elementary students in grades pre-K or grades kindergarten through 4th would not be affected, so they would stay put in their schools. However, when kids were in the 5th grade transitioning to the 6th grade, they would be required to go to the new attendance area. And then currently, the kids at the middle school and the high school remained at their school as long as parents could provide transportation. So what we did, because I was principal at Hidden Valley at the time, we all had to send out information to the parents to see if they were going to stay at Hidden Valley or if they were going to transport their kids, if they were going to go to Cave or transport their kids to Hidden Valley. We surveyed every single one, had to get the answer from them, so we knew exactly which kids were going to Cave and which ones were staying. So there was that parent transportation piece that was involved in this one. And then students were not allowed, the kindergartner through 4th graders were not allowed to piggyback with siblings. So it was likely you could have siblings at Cave and upper grade levels at Hidden Valley if the parents chose to transport.
Why did they do that?
So if the parents, mainly for VHSL stipulations, or if the kids just wanted to remain in their secondary schools, we allowed that to happen as long as parents provided transportation. However, we did not allow the elementary kids to make that choice. They had to go to the new districting area.
Just to keep, basically to keep it from stretching out over like 10 years, but
10,
to
12
achieve your
years,
goal.
Yeah. So that's the process they followed back then. And then the next time we redistrict was with Glenver and Mason's Cove. And so this was in 1920. This was a much, much smaller number of people. But it was the rising K through 5 Glen Cove students in the designated area would begin attending Mason's Cove in 1920 that fed into Glenver. So what we did is similar there. The rising 6th graders would attend Glenver Middle School. However, in this situation, they gave the option well, the rising 7th and 12th graders could stay at Northside High School in middle school. Part of the reason for that, too, is VHSL implications, because once 9th graders establish eligibility, that becomes an issue. So in this situation, what was different in this one, we provided transportation. So we, rather than having them rely on parent transportation, in this scenario, our buses were coming right by those addresses anyway. So we provided transportation to allow that continuation into their original school. Another thing that was different at the bottom is we allowed siblings of the secondary students to piggyback on those students, and they could continue to move forward into their feeder schools at Northside, and we provided transportation for 6 years. But once they hit the middle school, then parents would be responsible for transportation after 6 years. So I think next year, the year after next, is the end of our transportation obligation for that group of students. So just know that transportation becomes a factor, whether you want the parents to transport or whether we provide transportation. That was a discussion there. The other discussion item is, do siblings get to piggyback off of the secondary students? That was another difference. So some of the options that we have here, especially for Southwest County, because we're involving all 3 levels, you could follow the similar plan that they did at Hidden Valley to Cave Spring. This is a reversal of that same area from Cave Spring back to Hidden Valley. Now keep in mind that if those kids were kindergartners when we made that transition, they are probably current 10th graders. So, but we would allow them to continue through their school. So most likely we're not going to be impacting kids twice. But however, younger siblings could be impacted if they're spread across the board. There's just some numbers there that I put in using the Southwest County option. It's about 150 students that we were talking about. There's about 70 middle and high school students that would be impacted year 1 if we gave them the option for parents to transport. So 70 parents would be having to make that decision about their children in secondary schools. The following year, approximately 10 middle schoolers would then feed in, so that's how we get to the 150 over time. And then you could allow, this is another option, you can allow elementary grades K through 5 to stay in the same feeder track, and we can provide transportation, or we can say parents must provide transportation. So that's a decision that you would have to make. Another scenario which we have not practiced, you could always say we're going to redistrict, this is the date we're going to do it, and there are no exceptions, right? Everybody has to go to the school in which they are residing in. However, that's a problem for high schoolers because of VHSL eligibility. So that would be one exemption you'd have to make. And then you could, this is another one, you could begin the implementation with kindergarten students, and that way make the designation, but when they enter into kindergarten and redistrict at that point. However, that would take 9 years just before it will hit, impacting the numbers at the middle school and the high school. So you can see these options depend on how fast you want to move numbers to how slow you want to move numbers. So there's lots, and I'm sure this is just what we've seen in this school division. I'm sure there's lots of other ways of doing this, but this is a little bit of history of how we've done it in the past.
Can I, real quick, dissect what y'all are giving us from my district out, only because there will be no change on high school.
That's
No
right.
change on middle school.
That's right.
So it's simply at the elementary stage.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume most of that history and most of that is Cave, Hidden Valley.
Yeah.
And then the Mason's Cove would go from, or would they go to Glenver now instead of?
They would, that'd be different. Yes,
So-
each,
so you
each
can-
of those three are a little different because of that, yes.
So, and then I'll let, maybe y'all can think just a minute, but if we can go to mine is a more immediate to try and take some pressure off of Cundiff because it's in, you know, with the open concepts, we need to make an immediate impact. Do you have a recommendation? Should we say, you know, the buses are going to start going to the school they will go to now? If you want to stay in that school, you'll have to provide transportation.
I mean, that is an option.
Okay.
That is an option. Or you can say, starting kindergarten year, all students coming in are going to be designated, people who live in this area are going to go to this school starting their kindergarten year. It's going to be a slower
Well, the only
impact.
that's the problem is that, you know, to do that, we're talking about not getting a school now for 10 years, right? For Cove and Cundiff. So, you know, to me, that's not an option. So, I think to make the immediate impact to reduce these class sizes, it's almost got to be a now deal, right? So I don't know what y'all, I don't even know if y'all have any consideration for our area, but I like the idea. You know, I'm assuming that's the best plan forward as y'all have seen it, and I'm sure you've talked to Ashley and Julie and Leanne. So, you know, I'm okay with it, but I don't think you can grandfather. Maybe if they want to provide transportation, they can do that, but.
And I don't know what that would look like. I know when I was at Hidden Valley, over 50% of the students that were supposed to go to Cave stayed at Hidden Valley.
Right.
So, I mean, that's two different,
At the elementary level,
who
though, it's a
knows
whole
what it would
different-
look like
yeah,
there.
yeah.
But
Hidden Valley was brand new at the time.
it was. There were a lot of different
And,
factors.
yeah, there were some,
Right.
Yeah, we don't
there
have
were
that
some
situation
factors that
in
were,
Britain.
No.
Yeah.
that
some-
probably played into that
Some rats.
number.
Yeah.
Some dirty water.
So,
Use some next step
I
options.
do, yes. So potential next steps,
exactly
this
right.
is
That's right.
kind of the procedures we followed in the past. We sent out mailings to all the homes, inviting them to an open community meeting. And so we did this down at Bonsack, let them come and visit the school. We held the meeting in the school that they would be attending. And then we had maps and we shared all the information, walked through the plans with them, stood there and answered every single question until there were no more questions. And then we sent out surveys to each of those families and had them answer questions about how many children, what grade level, did they think they wanted to go to the transfer to Glenver, are they going to stay at Northside? Were they going to take transportation? Were they going to provide transportation? We got down to the very minute details for each family. I also had a box in there, if you would like a personal conversation, let me know and give me my phone number. There were probably 60 families with the Mason Cove, and we basically spoke to every single family personally in this transition. But I think that's what helped made it go smoothly, because we heard every single concern that they had. And then we were very flexible with that, because we were giving them lots of options. They could choose to stay with their feeder school, and we provided transportation. So the Mason Cove one was an easier transition because we offered a lot more support. So it's just all in how you want to structure it. And then, of course, we brought the survey results back and made a recommendation to the board.
those options were a whole lot easier. Now, we were involved with that Mason's Cove when you're dealing with a small number like
Right.
that. When you're starting to talk about the numbers that we're talking about over in the Cave Spring and Hidden Valley area, I don't know, that you can't have all those options.
You can.
Well, and I think that's something we want to talk to our transportation department about too. Is that what you're referring to as far as, yeah, because especially with driver shortages and so forth, that would play into what we can and can't do maybe. I think it's something we have to look into.
Yeah, so, as you said, this is just a consideration.
Yes.
I I wasn't around the last time you did this, obviously. I don't think I had even lived in Roanoke yet. But redistricting to balance is always difficult from what I've understood. You know, it's not an easy process. It's confusing, it's upsetting to some. It's a long, drawn-out process, it seems. You need ample time, you have to consult with your constituents, your people, allow for public comment, and then the shift looks like it could take years. And then I think what Ken pointed out, which I think is really smart, is the risk. You know, there's risk, it's not a perfect science. It's just not perfect, and you could actually overcorrect. So in terms of my district, we're looking at, we need 100 kids back to Hidden Valley High School. To David's point, Hidden Valley High School, it's still a beautiful school, don't get me wrong, but Cave Spring High School is a lot nicer right now, and so is Cave Spring Middle School. And we've had quite a few kids that have jumped ship from Hidden Valley to those other schools. My concern is that, you know, currently there's a downturn in the economy. Nobody likes to say the R word, but we are in a recession. We've got increased inflation, increased CPI. Interest rates are going to keep, well, I think the Fed's going to raise them again. And when we have recession, we have kids that are in the private schools that could no longer afford, perhaps, private schools. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think that we could have some kids coming from some private schools back to the public schools. And that would include even those who are homeschooled, because if you have a parent who's staying home to homeschool, they might actually have to go back to work to offset some of the new costs that are occurring right now with housing and interest rates and gas, and the list goes on and on. So there's so many variables at play. And I just think right now, for me personally, I would like to take a different approach, which would be less risk, involve less risk. I think we could get immediate results, and there'd be less disruption to some families, and it would actually be less upsetting. And then, of course, there's that transportation piece that you mentioned, Ken. So I would like to look at stopping the allowance of transfers. We have lots of kids that are leaving Hidden Valley High School and Hidden Valley Middle School for one reason or another, to head to Cave Spring Middle School and Cave Spring High School. So if we allowed immediately, effective next year, to allow those transfers to stop, and if we in fact stopped those transfers 2 or 3 years ago, just really, if somebody had a crystal ball to say, hey, look, we might have 30 kids, 40 kids jump ship, we could have stopped this, and we wouldn't be where we are right now, causing, understandably so, upset people who move to a certain place for a certain reason. I would suggest that we stop transfers, and that we also, but we allow employees who work at that school to allow their kids to transfer if that's desirable. And in terms of siblings that are already there, let's say you have somebody who's already at Cave Spring High School, and the parent says, well, Billy is going to be at Cave Spring High School next year. Well, I wouldn't allow the sibling transfers. That doesn't allow you, if that kid is already at Cave Spring and there's 3 or 4 more kids behind him, doesn't matter. Immediately, everybody has to be, Cave Spring would be closed. Because you're just not going to get it. And it's never a guarantee anyway. It's supposed to be a year-by-year process, my understanding, that even when you start it, we could effectively pull I'm not asking for this, I'm not suggesting it, hear me now, but you can pull every single kid if you want out of Cave Spring High School and Cave Spring Middle School right now and say you have to go back to Hidden Valley and Hidden Valley High School. We could do that. I'm not asking for that, but we need our numbers up. And I know it's a staffing issue, Ken, because we've talked about that, but I think there's a way to balance it that, again, results in less risk and a quicker, more expedited shift. And I would prefer to take that shift gradually and not jump in with both feet, especially where we're at with the economy. And when economy hits a low, you'll see more kids going to the apartments, looking for more affordable housing, and we're just gonna have more of an imbalance. And we don't wanna overcorrect, and it's not a perfect science.
Any other comments?
Well, I understand, and that would be a different, process. Plus, it may take a little longer time, but we would also say, if you're already there, then that's where you go, And the numbers, I don't know what the exact numbers are.
I can tell you if you want. So Cave Spring High School currently has 43 students who are either non-residents, meaning they don't live in Roanoke County, or they're out of area. So it's 22 non-residents, 21 out of area. And then, so I don't have the breakdown in terms of those 21 out of area, how many would go back to Hidden Valley? Probably some of them are, but
Yeah.
do you think most?
I don't know.
We don't know. Okay, we can get that information. And then Cave Spring Middle has 24, 12 and 12, 12 non-resident, 12 out of area. Again, we have to go back and check to see where they're coming from. And then Hidden Valley, not that part really matters, but Hidden Valley has 50 total, 12 non-residents, 38 out of area, and Hidden Valley Middle has 22.
So you're not closing Hidden Valley transfers, you're just closing
Right,
Cave
so-
Spring transfers?
Yeah, so the Cave Spring is the ones that would matter.
And I would have to guess, and I haven't been in this business for a long time, but once Cave Spring closes, if kids want to come over to Salem, they're going to say, okay, well, what's the next
If I
school
can't get
that's in?
Cave Spring, then.
I'll get Hidden Valley.
Right.
So I think you would see a trickle down of that. It's my suggestion.
I would recommend too that you start at either sixth grade or ninth grade year, especially ninth grade because of VHSL eligibility. So we couldn't immediately just tell that we could tell the kids that you're starting today, you have to go to Hidden Valley. We would have to do a superintendent's permission for them to transfer with eligibility. We could do that. That is going to cause a lot of heartburn.
Yeah, you're saying pull them out. I'm not suggesting that
Yeah.
at all.
Right.
And I want to be
Right.
very clear
No,
here.
no, no.
Because kids deserve to have friend groups and sports teams and everything else that's fun that goes along with school. That's what keeps our kids in school, is the fun
Yes.
that goes with the school.
So if we kept things the same, would we keep the same staffing levels, or would we drop those back?
I would have to recommend that we look at that because, I mean, basically, you're still, especially for a period of
Because
time.
we got
we're gonna have
1,200 kids at Byrd.
About 1140,
800
but yeah, getting close to 12.
And 800 at Hidden Valley.
I think the
With the
class
same
that's coming
staff.
in next year, though, is going to be bigger. The eighth,
So is ours. Ours is
So is
about
yours.
30 or 40 kids more.
yeah.
Yeah, something we have
I
to look
looked at
at.
that when you look on here on the, Angela sent us the sheet. So we're looking, and so when I ask for something like I've asked, and, I mean, that's a big deal when you're looking at staffing levels the same at 1,200 versus 800. I mean, it's, this has always been a tough one, right? Is the rebalancing at Hidden Valley Cave Spring. So it is tough, but
You know what's shocking to me, Tim, is that we don't go by magistrates. So when they redistrict magistrates, I mean, that's Cave Spring Magistrate, that block, right? So why does 12 o'clock Knob, and correct me if I'm wrong, you go up 221, 12 o'clock Knob
We'll go to.
goes to Cave.
It's because they go to Back Creek, so you try to keep your feeder system.
No, but I have kids at Back Creek that go to.
But that's the Windsor Hills
But
District.
that's the Windsor Hills District.
Yeah,
So
I'm sorry, I was talking about just the attendance zone.
Yeah,
No, and
so
then
no,
Cave
in terms
Springs-
of magistrates, I'm elected by people, right? It's an elected
Right.
position. In the perfect world, your magistrate district would line up with your schools, at
Sure.
least the high school level, and it doesn't. So 12
Yeah.
o'clock Knob, when it kind of swoops off 221, should technically go to Hidden Valley High School, but for some reason,
I think I'll go back to that first slide, our crazy geography, in terms of
Cave
how do
Spring Elementary has, the bulk of them go to Hidden Valley versus. maybe
Right.
because they all live over in
10%.
Castle Rock, that area.
But it is in my magisterial
Yeah.
district,
Right.
just Green Valley. It's in mine,
it's yours,
or
yeah.
I'm going to Hidden Valley.
It's certainly easier for them to draw lines as far as voters than it is for us to draw lines as far as students, I think. I mean, they
Sure.
try to keep each of their magisterial districts around 18,000.
Everything on this side of 221 is mine.
So that's.
Well, I want the Board of Supervisors to recognize that the board member from Benton is willing to move some, not wanting to, but needing, is willing to send some kids to different schools. And Bonsack is dropping down to 300 with rooms closed, and we're willing to.
But they're ultimately going to the same high school.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
middle school.
No, that's right.
Yeah, they
that's-
are.
that's
That's
the-
the difference.
No, I get it. Oh, it's
Yeah,
hard.
that's the key.
I get why it's hard for y'all, don't get me wrong. But the point is, when they talk about, we gotta, fill these schools and, we're overcapacitated, or undercapacitated, or whatever,
The bond's
one-
actually
the
tough
one that
when
they
it's in the
say
geography.
is looking to just spend is doing that. And I'm not saying anything, because I get it on your side.
Tim, when you get your new school, everyone's gonna be hopping over there.
I think we're onto something here. I think the sooner we can equal those schools out, the better, personally, when you look at that. Drawing it out over 10 years doesn't make no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, it's, the quicker, I think the quicker you can do it and just pull the scab off and move on. It's not easy, never easy. I'm sure it wasn't easy back in 2010. I'm sure it wasn't easy when Bent Mountain Elementary School had to close. At some point, we're gonna have to make tough decisions.
Again,
And
that's from I'm not speaking for you, but for me, I totally agree. I think because of the trying to relieve some of the pressure on the size of that one, it does make sense for us. Now, y'all have to decide what makes sense for y'all, but.
So I guess what we would need is some direction. Do you want to look at trying to schedule some community meetings or surveys, or do you want to just mull it over till next work session, or?
You heard me.
What's the pleasure?
I would prefer a different approach. I prefer to investigate that other approach because it's more immediate, it's less risk. And again, I can't
Yeah, I
emphasize
think
this
so,
enough.
too.
The downturn in the economy,
I
we
think
do not
you're
know what's going to
jumping.
happen. And this is not an exact science.
Have you been talking to the Board of Supervisors?
No, I'm just saying,
checking.
Tim.
Because that's what they're
We're
going to say.
very
to
well
us.
read.
But
let's
nonetheless,
revisit
I
it at the
understand.
December work session and be prepared. I mean, I'm sure based on this just a discussion today, we'll hear from some people.
Right.
But what I would say is
You
for
won't,
us.
we will.
See, that's why I was kind of separating us.
You're not gonna hear anything.
I think we're okay to go ahead and
I
schedule
mean, you can do it
something.
in Holland.
Because we're looking at, I would rather give people as much notice as possible rather than say in March, well, we're thinking about this now. We
Well,
want to talk.
there's
You know what I
no
mean?
way. I mean, I'm sorry, y'all might like to do that and make a
I'm
decision
talking
for
about-
us, but I mean, it's
No,
just.
no. I'm talking about for the elementary schools in the village.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. We'll do whatever y'all say here. I trust y'all. But I'm saying on my side, because we know that's got to happen, as much as, and how painful, I don't know what we do and how we alleviate it, but yeah, I'm just, sorry about that, Mike. I meant for us. I think I would like us to schedule some meetings and start moving forward because we know we need to do this for the elementary schools. Now, what we do in, even in Brent's area, y'all can defer, I'll defer, to what y'all think in those areas. But is
So
everybody
try to do
okay if
some
we start
community
with?
meetings for the.
That's what I'm
Vincent
asking.
area.
Is everybody okay with that for?
Well, for you, yeah.
for
Go
our
ahead.
party,
You do
right?
that, yeah. I don't, that's, you
do
do
we
what works
want-
best for you, to be honest.
Do we want to try to do some community meetings just to get feedback? I mean, feedback is going to be good.
I don't,
I
not right
don't.
now. Not for me. I mean, you can have them in Hollands if you want to. And this is an easy thing when you're not involved.
Oh, it's not easy,
No.
and I don't want to do
No,
it.
and I'm not
Yeah.
taking it lightly or
Right.
thinking that it
No.
Well,
has to
but you're
happen,
pushing
but
it
to get that
along when we're not-
information.
We're
I
saying
mean-
we don't want to push it along right now, and you're saying, oh, yeah, let's push it along.
Yeah, I think Mike and I are on the same page here.
I'll defer to you, that's you guys' districts and Tim's
Yeah.
district. I'm completely
And
staying out
and I
of you.
defer to Tim for his district.
Right,
You know,
I agree
what
with
you're
that.
doing, and you want to move it on, that's great, Tim.
Yeah, I just think
Staff-
we have to for ours.
Staff recommendation would be, I mean, obviously.
If you're gonna, yeah, it depends on what you have in mind. I mean, I think, if you have in mind, if you're inclined to proceed for anything, in terms of making a decision, definitely the recommendation would be to talk to people and get input, right? So it sounds like the consensus would be to go ahead and proceed with those for the Cundiff, Horn, and Bonsack potential move. not Hidden Valley Cave Spring. I mean, this other one,
Well, I know this, you had mentioned, is it 12 to 15 kids, something
very
like
few
that?
students right now, yeah.
At that, yeah, I'd like to have some conversations in the community before I would want to, weigh an opinion on it.
Right, just go ahead and have maybe like a meeting and take a temperature, have a visit out to the school.
Well, and I don't, yeah, I mean, I think that could be handled by making visits to schools.
Right, okay.
And I would request that we think of how you want to approach differently, stopping the transfers into Cave Spring Middle School and Cave Spring High School, the effect of that. 'Cause
Yeah.
that would,
I
mean, it's 12 kids, I mean, it's 24 kids over a couple years. That adds up. We're looking at 100 kids. You're going to get there quicker doing it that way than you will any other way, in my opinion.
Right, so, I think what we probably should do on that piece is maybe bring it back and just request action from the board. That way, it gives our staff and our principals leg to stand on and say, no, sorry, we're not taking it anymore, or closed. I mean, we could do that administratively, or we can consult with legal counsel to see what she suggests, but
But you
I'm not
don't-
sure what's been done to we've had
Has it been done in
situations
the past? I
before.
feel like
Yeah,
you
we're
had to do it
closed.
for Hidden Valley, saying you were closed.
I think
right?
different times. So let's do some homework and research in terms of how that's
And how
been
many
done and
actually
what-
of that 43? I mean, you said 21, 20.
I can give you a breakdown
Oh,
by grade
right.
level.
So we
Right.
And that's where a lot of it is probably going to make the impact is grade level, I would think.
Yeah. Right.
And I'll tell you what, this would really alleviate some of the issues that I'm hearing from my constituents about kids jump into another school because they have a better athletic program. I think the schools match up academically, honestly. I love all the teachers. I know a lot of teachers at both the schools. But when you've got a prettier school, when you've got a winning basketball state champ school, and you've got some other things that are really going in Cave Springs' way, it's hard to deny the fact that it's a very desirable school right now. And we have kids that are going over to that school. And this may be very unfavorable. There might be a lot of kids who really want to leave Hidden Valley and head over there, but, when we've got the situation that we're in, we're just enabling this imbalance.
So we'll do some research and remind ourselves in terms of how that's been done previously and bring that back.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So we are going to move forward.
Move forward with
Yeah, what I
the-
heard was, for the other two to go ahead and move forward and try to get some community input,
Okay.
and then bring it back.
And if we
All
can
right.
have a little bit of direction on a plan and timing, so we could present something at that, so
So,
we can communicate
so
on that.
my thought is that we move it forward for next year, but that we start the process and planning now so that they have, the time. I mean, unless y'all think it needs to happen quicker.
No, I guess what I'm thinking is, are we gonna say all the kids in that grade level start at the new school next year? Or are we gonna say, starting kindergarten, everybody new coming in?
See, I don't think you can, I mean, that doesn't do
gonna
what
take a
we,
while.
yeah, that doesn't do what we need to do.
Yeah, we definitely would not recommend, uprooting a current student mid-year.
Yeah, no, yeah,
The start of next school year would
Right.
make some sense.
yeah.
Yeah, to get the result that you're looking for.
All right, we can plan it out that way.
Okay, thank you.
All right. What happened to the quick meeting tonight? Item 2.09, William Byrd High School contingency items. Mr. Kegels.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. So we had previously had discussions about the contingency fund at William Byrd High School, and when we had those discussions, I reported that there had already been $152,000 that had come out of the contingency for cafeteria modifications and $85,000 out for the furniture overspend. But those actions had never actually been brought to the board, so at the next meeting, we'll be bringing those two items for official approval. But they were in the discussions, and when we were talking about the lights, those amounts had already been deducted. Questions?
That was quick.
It's just one.
Okay.
But they're all quick,
All right.
I hope.
Item 210, Glenville Elementary School courtyard repair.
Yeah, Yeah, Mr. Hudson asked us to take a look at the courtyard, I think after he saw the condition of it out there. And so we went out and we just brought a couple of pictures here. Chuck, if you, can you bring up the other one as well? This courtyard is used by the special needs preschool program that is housed out there. And at some point, the school cut down the trees that were there and then sprayed this mulch in there, which has made the courtyard essentially inaccessible to wheelchairs and walkers and things of that nature. So we did develop a plan to recondition that area and provide just a few pieces of playground equipment. What we would like to do is take the entire area that's currently dirt and mulch and put in that rubber poured-in-place material, and then provide some slides that are appropriate for that group, for that preschool group. The cost of that would be about $85,000, which we would request to be appropriated from minor capital.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes,
Just want
sir.
to clarify what this is for. So Ken, can you talk about what this class is and what condition, some of these children are in to not be able to utilize regular playgrounds?
Yeah, it's actually a really unique situation, plus a unique setting right here. So I don't know if you can picture Glenver Elementary. So this courtyard is totally enclosed, correct me if I'm wrong. And what's unique about, well, I guess Ben Forest is kind of like this, but the classroom doors at Glenver Elementary, when it was built, it's one of those situations where there's a lot of classroom doors that go to the exterior, they have exterior doors. This one has classrooms so doors go straight out to that courtyard. Is totally enclosed, so it's hard to have access. It's an ideal situation for these young students that we're talking about, is because it's very safe, it's secure, it's totally enclosed. And these are the students in our program that have the severest disabilities. You do have a lot of students that would be using wheelchairs and walkers and that kind of things. These are on that end of the spectrum. So, Mr. Johnson as a principal, he's trying to be creative and use that space. It's just not usable as it is. And so, it's just something we want to look at to see if we can, correct it. It is a unique opportunity, just again, from a safety standpoint, for those kids. And again, those unique kids that have some very high needs, and just what we could do and ought to consider doing to make that a space that they could really use and thrive in.
And these kids are not only from Glenver, correct?
Right, this is a FACES program, and do you know Miss?
They're from other schools.
Yeah.
I'll support you on that, Brent. I mean, why not have that space be usable?
Right.
And it's like a tripping hazard
looks
for
dangerous.
kids. It looks dangerous.
Well, they actually stopped using it, correct, Todd? After you went out there, we put a stop to it.
I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, when I went out, I
Yeah.
basically had to say, you've got to stop using this, because there
Yeah.
were stumps in the ground at the time, which we've removed the stumps now, but we haven't been able to do anything with the rest of it yet. It's obviously not going to be cheap to fix it, but we'll make it beautiful and usable and safe.
Will there still be
It's not
access to get out, or are you going to keep it enclosed?
Well, so the classroom door, the classrooms have doors that
I
go
mean
out.
to the outside. It'll still be enclosed, but you won't be able to go from that playground outside, right?
Right.
Not without going through the building.
Right.
Right.
I think that's the beauty of it, is it is a
Yeah,
courtyard
that
playground,
it
and
is
it's safe.
enclosed.
Keeps everybody close.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of our schools should have courtyards like that, I think.
It's a unique
It's
unique
nice.
place for a unique population that,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we have to serve these folks. We
Mm-hmm.
have to provide something that they can use, especially since it's not only the Glenver community, but it's everywhere else. I think it's important that we provide something that they're able to use.
And this, you said would come from minor capital.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Peterson, that would put minor capital where?
If you did it before we had rollover, it would put us at 232.86.
Rollover is,
December.
Well, and one quick question, I know you put in the timeline that they're about 27, 28 weeks out. So how does that work in terms of having to pay for it?
Well, we'd have to ask Ms. Peterson, I guess, that question. I mean, we would get the PO, it's just like we did for the playgrounds, it's the same company. We'd get the PO immediately as soon as you guys approved it. Now, I honestly don't know in terms of, we don't pay those until it's complete.
appropriated the funds.
Right, well, it's, right, assuming they approve at the next meeting, we do that part immediately.
Right, so we
But I
get-
guess the question is, paying for it, do we
But you're not crossing fiscal years, right?
But you can't get the PO approved in the system until we set aside the funding from Roanoke Capital.
Right.
So you have to do the budget entry for this.
So we have to approve it.
Right.
Then you can provide the PO.
Right.
And then that'll come off the.
But I
so
guess
that'll
Brent
make
was
it-
asking, are we going to pay for it before the rollover, or we wouldn't actually have to pay for it until after? Because it wouldn't be completed for,
You'd have to do the budget entry now,
okay.
and then
It's
rollover
okay.
won't be until December 18th or whatever.
Okay.
I guess my biggest concern is we're already looking at probably, May before we actually get it done?
Yeah, 4 months, 4 or 5 months.
So we're still looking at the surplus of 1.7, or do we have any better?
We're looking at having 826, 789 going back into the Roanoke Capital from roll.
So,
So we're looking at having $1,059,000 in Roanoke Capital
yeah.
after this review.
I say go ahead and do
Yeah,
it.
so if you want to do it.
Make that an action item at next Thursday's meeting.
Yep. Good for you, Brent, that
Please.
you saw that need, and it's for the entire county,
I
too.
can't take all the credit for it. I've got a great group of moms out there in the community that brought it to my attention, and obviously, having a child with a disability, it is close to my heart.
And their, their church partners previously did a lot of work, even like, they actually carried some of that equipment over the roof to get it in there, and some dads and stuff. So there's been a lot put into it over the years, but there's also, it definitely needs improvement.
Yeah, we got a great community out there, and they're great
Yeah.
about bringing stuff to my attention, so.
That's great.
Just for clarification, that is just the surface. That's no playground equipment inside there or anything.
No, there'll be some playground equipment. There'll be a few pieces.
Oh, there will, in that 85,000.
Yes.
Okay.
The surface is,
Do you want to look at all the other
saw the
schools
picture.
to see if they need
$36,000.
85,000?
Item number
Or is that-
2,
Is that okay?
Just asking.
if it has an interior courtyard and that same program that they have out there, then we can do it. 2.11 surplus items from the warehouse.
yeah, at the next meeting, we'll be requesting permission to surplus Bradford charging carts, the charging trays, 4 AED machines, the horizontal compressor, exam table, a couple of blowers, drills and chargers, and a set of wrestling mats from William Byrd.
We'll probably get a couple million out of that, won't we?
I doubt it.
You could bid on them and pay that, Mr. Greenway.
I'll give you $50 for all.
Thank you.
Trouble is, they bid on them, they don't come pick them up.
Any questions on that?
Really?
Yeah. They don't, do they, Todd?
Page 68.
That is the challenge right now, is getting somebody to actually come and get them. We are desperately trying to get those things out of here.
Well, I bid on it, right?
You have your book on.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kegels.
Do I have my?
That'll be a consent item agenda next week.
Yes, sir.
Well, the last one.
All
I'll
right.
bring that back.
Item number 2.12, the SBA delegate discussion. Later this month, I will be required to log on and make some votes for our board on the 9 legislative positions that the VSBA is recommending. Actually, excuse me, there are 10 of them, 11. I know I sent out an email a couple weeks ago just asking you to look over those so that it is a board consensus, or at least a board majority on each of these 11 items as to how I vote.
How you vote?
And I appreciate Ms. Fashani bringing this to my attention. We've not discussed this in a work session in my previous 5 years. I don't know if
They really hadn't. I don't
these
think so.
have been voted on. It's interesting that all 11 legislative positions were proposed by Fairfax County. One was a joint Fairfax and Loudoun County, but all 11 legislative positions that we'll be required to vote on came from Fairfax.
We lose if we go against them anyway.
I'm staying away from it.
So I guess I'll just open the floor. I mean, have you guys been able, I know Cheryl has read through them and is going to have some comments. Hopefully the others have as well. I just need to know how to vote on these.
I can open it up.
Please.
So out of the 11 positions, and my understanding, and I've relayed this to David, is basically, as a school board, we agree with these positions. or we don't. And that's our prerogative. It's to the locality whether or not we're going to support them. So you'll go ahead, we'll discuss which ones we approve or not approve. You'll vote that you approve them or not virtually, because they don't do in-person voting, which is ridiculous. And also, the VSBA does not allow you to know how anybody votes anymore. At one point, you did know, but now they no longer let you know how anybody voted. And then once that information is tabulated, you'll know right then and there at that meeting. And then my guess is that all 11 of these positions are going to pass, because people just kind of rubber stamp them. And then we're going to have to come back as a school board and say, well, that's fine and dandy for you, but we as a locality do not adopt legislative position number 1, 1, or 2, or 2, or 3. And that way, when our legislators meet, they'll know that Roanoke County did not support whatever position. And my recommendation in doing that is so that we have public record, so our constituents know what we support and what we don't support, and in addition, so that our legislators know what we support and don't support. Because we all know that what happens in Fairfax County is different than what happens in Roanoke County. So on that note, I'm okay with every single one except for 2. Legislative position number 3, which is 3.1, educational technology funding. I don't know if I need to read it out loud. If anybody wants to look it up, they can. But I don't think this, I think we already have, what this basically says is we have to refresh and do what they say when they tell us to do it. And I think we already have a great technologically fund set up. And I think we as a locality can decide when we replace our technology. And we shouldn't have to do it when they say it. In addition, there's extensive data collection. And I think this should be really alarming that the state should fund the implementation of the extensive data collection, cleansing, warehousing, tracking, and reporting requirements placed on the State Department of Education. I don't know about you guys, but I really don't like my data being collected. And this is allowing that. And it's collecting not just my data, but my children's data. And I have a problem with that. The next one that I don't agree with is school bus purchasing. And this one basically says that we need to buy electric school buses. And we need to do this how they say, and we need to use their companies. And the issue that I take with that is that we live in a very mountainous area. Our buses, electric school buses, will not do well in Roanoke. Diesel buses will do better. Now, evidently, there's a diesel crisis that we have on, but we can't worry about that. The electric school bus issue, is a bigger issue, because then you need to hire a mechanic to maintain those electric school buses. And to hire a mechanic who does electric school buses is twice as much as it would be for a diesel mechanic. Then you have the parts, then you have the labor. I mean, this is another thing. These electric school buses are considered combustible. So if there's an issue with one of these electric school buses, it cannot be parked near any other combustible regular buses or cars or anything, because it could combust. And if you look this up, this is an issue. So then we'd have to have a whole nother parking lot for our electric school buses that need to be fixed.
Well, didn't you, earlier at the beginning when we were talking solar, didn't you say, aren't you pushing solar and
No,
electric buses?
I wanted an independent study.
Oh, my God.
Independent study.
So we're going to do an independent study to tell
Oh,
us
not
not
for
to do
this.
this? I
No.
know, I get it.
No.
But you said something about solar and electric school buses that we need, that would be a good idea.
No.
Isn't that
I
contradictory?
No, I did not think electric school buses are a good idea. I think I was joking. You misheard me. Dave.
Maybe I misunderstood.
I think you were, yeah, I was joking. Because Dave and I had just talked about it. So anyway, what they're looking
Maybe
at
that was
is, yeah, I was joking. The electric school buses is not a good fit for Roanoke County. And I think we are elected by constituents who we have to represent them, and this is not a benefit to us locally. It's a benefit to Fairfax, because Fairfax has flat streets, they have big pockets, and they're gonna reap the benefits with all this tax, and we're not gonna ever be able to see any of that.
I agree with you.
Well, and I think with the electric, we saw what happened with the hurricane and catching on fire, and then they'd come back, the fire department have to come back, so these batteries, You know, we don't know what they may do and what they may cause.
Where are we gonna charge them?
Yeah. and
That's a
we'd
whole
have-
other issue.
Well, you'd have to have
Wouldn't all
another
these people
parking lot
have
that would have the
electric cars?
charging systems, and so.
Yeah,
it's
you'd have
not-
to support that infrastructure as well,
Yeah, I
which would
think
be
the
more
two
costly.
that you presented, I saw.
Yep, I'm with you.
And
I still want to give you a
I
hard
think
time.
Cheryl did bring up a good point. It is important for us to stay in communication with our legislators to let them know where we stand and don't stand. I mean, because essentially this is our voice. I mean, that's kind of what we're paying them for. And if we don't agree with what they're doing, we need to make sure that we let people know that.
And it's not, from my research on this, it's not unusual for school boards to develop a local position. This is not out of the ordinary.
Well, to your point, it wasn't many years ago when we got a recommendation to buy diesel buses. Was it diesel?
Natural.
Propane.
Yes, propane, yeah.
Propane buses.
And they don't do well in the
Most of the
mountainous
ones
region.
And
They
now,
don't.
and now we got 10 of those.
Then we gotta have them for non-mountains.
Can you surplus those?
Yeah. We digress.
Legislative position number 11, a little curious to me as to how we might think about that on the allowing for local control to determine participation in VHSL activities. Basically, the VSBA and VHSL is saying each local school district can determine whether or not they want to allow homeschooled children to play in their district.
So that was actually discussed at VAS this week, so I can tell you a little bit about what was proposed last year. Delegate March actually proposed, I think it was House Bill 511. So basically, there was two pieces of that. One, prohibit any school from affiliating with an organization such as VHSL that did not allow homeschoolers to participate. So one, it forces VHSL to allow it, and her bill specifically had certain conditions, and it really seemed to be geared toward home instruction. You know, we deal a lot with families who ask for religious exemptions, right? So for this one, it says home instruction, and they have to show 2 years academic progress, because anybody who's approved for homeschool does have to show each year, you know, evidence of there's a little bit of accountability there. Of course, they have to remain in good standing, you know, in terms of discipline and those kinds of things. It also allows the charging of a fee to participate on the sport, just because otherwise we're not getting any ADM.
Don't we already allow these students
No.
to participate?
That was a Tim Tebow bill that got dropped.
That's right. So, yeah, it almost passed last year.
Yeah, it's close.
And so, but it does allow the charging of a fee, just because if they're not enrolled with us, we don't get any, you know, ADM funding for them. So you can charge a fee for equipment and so forth, right? So, so the second part of that, which really gets to what you just now said, I think, would be, let's say VHSL says, yes, we'll allow students to be eligible to do that under those conditions. It still would be up to local school boards to determine if you want your schools to allow it or not. So one, there's the VHSL piece kind of pushing their hand in terms of allowing it. And then secondly, still retain local control for local school boards to decide if they want to do it or not.
I think it brings it back, if I'm not mistaken, back to the local school boards, which is
Yeah.
how it should have been from the beginning.
And I heard there was 35 states who've actually passed this, and, you know, whatever fears people have about what the repercussions, but it really haven't materialized. I mean, you know, by and large, I mean, well, a lot of kids or, you know, families who want to homeschool do that for a reason, and they're not necessarily going to want to participate in the sports, you know, because they have the reasons for wanting to homeschool to begin with. So I'm not sure, I mean, personally, that you know, any repercussions, there's any, I mean, you know, a lot of schools are having trouble fielding their teams as it is,
Yeah.
and so.
I thought we had one at the middle schools, the only reason I asked.
Homeschoolers?
Yeah.
Not allowed, so if there is one.
It's not allowed. It's against the law.
Might
But
be
I thought this
happening
was
slightly
interesting.
north of here.
I think this is telling. I think that Tim Tebow bill is gonna pass
I
next
think
time
it has
around.
a good chance of passing this year, yeah.
Yeah, so I think they have to change their policy in anticipation of that, because then they'd have to, their position. It's not
They'll have
po-
to,
it's
if the
position.
law passes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well.
And personally, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Mr. Greenway?
Yeah, not related to this, but I just wanted to finish up with a couple things.
Oh, well, okay, this vote takes place at noon on the 10th before our next meeting, so
So Cheryl, you're saying go ahead and pass, but we may change the adoption of a couple.
No, so what,
Two that you're
when
not.
when they're gonna take a roll call, and they're gonna say who's here, and then they're gonna say David Linden, and he's gonna say yay or nay on each
On each one?
on each
Okay,
one.
I got
So
you.
all the school board representatives, the delegates will
I'm
do
good with
this.
that.
Now, I would like to talk to Gina Patterson about this, they need to bring this back to real live voting. So it used to be just like in Congress where you put up your hand, yea or nay, and you can kind of look around the room and see who's voting which way. It kind of makes sense, it'd be nice to know that.
And then let the public go up and speak.
A little more transparent. for
And
sure.
they would speak
Yes,
at
yeah.
each one of these items, and then you'd vote on it.
Yeah, and instead, it's just.
In
it's-
person.
It's not transparent, and then the fact that now you can't even go and ask, like David, we could collectively decide how we would like you to vote on every single position, and you could go ahead and go rogue and vote against what we said, what the majority said, and we would never even know it.
And he probably would.
No.
Yeah.
Tim didn't just
Yeah.
say that, did he?
But you're not,
I think you might consider it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Well, I'm gonna get back at him.
That's right.
So if what I'm hearing, vote no on 3 and 4?
Those two, yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Yes on everything else?
Yep.
and then,
Well, it sounds like the other one that you
Will
brought
work
up is gonna
itself
be
out.
looked
Yeah.
at, maybe would be a moot point if it passes legislation.
Well, are you talking about the VHSL?
Yeah.
Yeah, the thought is, right now, VHSL plans to oppose it.
Yeah.
But if VSBA supports it, they might change their mind about that.
yeah. So the next step would be, after you vote, I think you're gonna get a notification of what passes, and then we have to come back to our board meeting, into a board meeting, and pick a local position. And we would ask Angela to send a letter, and I would suggest that a letter go out to all of our legislators as well, so that they know how we voted with an attachment of all the propositions, the proposals, positions, so they know how we voted. Because then they are supposed to be notified, but we don't know if they will be notified, and I think they should know
We should have
how we
said
voted.
Cheryl was our delegate.
Next year we'll know.
I'm serious, I'm not being, but I do have a couple things before we close,
Okay,
because I know we haven't been here long enough.
yeah. Anything else on that topic? All right, Mr. Greenwood?
So, and we've talked about this, but Dr. Nicely, what I'd like to ask, I would like to revisit that cell phone policy. See if what the other districts are doing, if they're doing. But I love the idea of being disconnected when you go into class. And I don't, again, that's just a thought, but, I'll see what y'all recommend or say.
So what our current policy says, you have an email in your inbox that.
Yeah, no,
I sent one too.
I know, not that you should have seen it already, but it basically says, here's our current policy, and our current policy actually is that they're not allowed to use them in class without teacher permission.
I get that.
But we also know that's not being enforced, and probably because teachers don't
They would spend
necessarily
all
want to fight
class
that battle or
doing it.
feel like they're going to be supported. So, yeah, what I recommend is, one, let's find out. In fact, I started surveying just informally some superintendents in the area to see what their official policy is. But bring that back together, follow Mr. Hudson's advice, and talk to our middle school and high school principals, bring that back together for further discussion, look at our policy, and one, either strengthen our policy, or two, at the very least, use this opportunity to reinforce it and reemphasize it. So
I've
that's-
asked a lot about this in the schools, and it's not, in some teachers, it's not worth managing because they'll discipline the whole class time trying to get them out of their hands and instead of teaching, and, then they, like you said, will they be supported, and how do you do that?
I've seen some classrooms,
And then
Northside
there's
High
some-
School one for sure. I know there's a teacher that has the, pockets in the back of the room and they deposit them
Perfect.
on the way
There
in
you
and
go.
out, but.
Yep.
It's very hard as a teacher, I think, or anybody that's in administration, to say, hand me your phone.
Right.
Because then because it's my personal property.
Now you're responsible.
And now they're responsible, and actually talking to Mr. Whitlow about this yesterday, he said there was an incident where the teacher took the phone, and then when the kid was given the phone back, the kid claimed that the teacher messed up the phone.
Right, so there is
And
that.
so then there's this, responsibility that's
Yeah,
at hand,
I
and
think-
that's really not fair either.
I agree. I think anytime leaves their possession, I mean, that's a dicey proposition,
Well,
but
couldn't
but
it-
certainly they can be kept in their book bag.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like,
the
you don't
thing. You
have-
can
Yeah,
tell them to
that's
keep
what-
it in their book bag, not,
Then you don't have
and
to
then
say
we don't
hand
have
over your
property.
phone.
We haven't touched it.
Right, exactly. So I did send out a policy, because I took a poll too among some of my school board member friends, and I had 20 people respond, and 19 out of 20 all had a cell phone policy in place. One was implementing one, another one was actually reworking their cell phone policy, because they had it written as zones. So they had like a red zone, a green zone, a blue zone, and the zones are just way too confusing. And so they're looking at readdressing that.
Would the
So-
zones be like, bathrooms or red zone, like you'd never have it out versus a hallway versus a classroom or something?
Yeah, so they tried to zone it, like a red zone would be in the classroom. But she said it's not working. So they have to go back to the.
Well, I
drawing
think
board.
that's
Just
it.
too confusing.
I suspect everybody has a policy, to what, I mean, how are they enforcing it? How is this
And-
working for you?
Yeah, and it wasn't being enforced. But the policy that I sent you from another school district, I liked. And I think it's a good one that we should take a look at.
On that topic, I was talking to a teacher from Reed Mountain Middle School a couple weeks ago, and they now have the technology where when students come in with their laptops, the teacher can see every web browser that is open and shut it down. And I don't remember what it's called. Jeff, any idea what that?
There's a number of different ones that can do that. Of course, that would just be on their school-based laptops.
Right. But if they're on their laptop on something other than school-related activity, the teacher can X them out of it.
I like that.
I like that too.
Technology's a good thing. It can also be a bad thing.
Well, it's definitely a distraction, for sure.
Also, obviously, next Tuesday's election, I don't know if we're getting I don't think Horn's ever been a polling spot. But apparently she's been giving instructions of what she needs to do by the people that are, so who sets our schools up to be
It's,
polling places?
I mean, the registrar
And
goes through,
Twitter.
they've added a lot of schools now because they were kind of told to kind of like get away from some of the churches, is that right?
They had to leave the churches, and so they, in those areas, they had to go to schools, so
Well,
we
then
have added more.
they need to probably go to these schools and set up whatever they need set up. Is it our responsibility to set up whatever they want
Well,
us
it's
to?
just certain things, like what is it?
So it is a touchy process. So they have to have enough tables, chairs for all the pollers. It has to be there before they open up at 5:30 in the morning. Nobody else can be in the site. They're very strict. There's tons of rules. They have to have exactly these items. And it is a pressure on the principals. We've been dealing with this for years because they have to clean out areas. They have to have a microwave and a kitchen area and a refrigerator and in these things. So it has been intensive on our principals, but the ones who've been doing it over years have just gotten used to it. So it's a matter of calling the warehouse, getting the tables and the chairs there. They'll eventually get in the rhythm of it, but yeah, it's a struggle. It is.
All right. I guess we just let that one go. I didn't know how that worked.
I'll reach out to her and try to walk her through it. Yeah.
And then, any change in SROs? Nothing? I mean, we haven't heard anything. I mean, we're just still stuck at.
Since Tuesday, all right.
I will tell you that we're fully staffed on our end.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but I guess.
It just from my standpoint, I've read this, I mean,
Are they-
what he said out loud at the joint meeting, I think is something that we need to turn back around in it, because basically what I heard you say was, you've got folks who could do it, it's a matter of the county kind of looking at how they're funding, how they fund those things, right?
Correct.
And they have the funding, they've got the positions budgeted.
15
so-
unfunded now. They should have money that they can do this with.
Yeah, you're going to meet with Kaywood? Did you meet yet?
No, so he did reach out to the sheriff, and there's a meeting set up later this month.
Oh,
Okay.
good, okay. They will get more. Last question. I would like to see if you and Dr. Stigo or whoever would reach out personally to Mr. Youngkin, because you sent this out about the legislators and the state superintendent. I'd love for them to come visit, because the state superintendent's different, to Cundiff and Cove and see our schools. And that would be a, great, I think we do have a governor that's in tune with education right now. I mean, he's really, hitting on all cylinders, and I'd like him to see, what we're dealing with. Maybe he can help the board, help find some funding or see what we're dealing with.
November's Meet with Your Legislators Month.
Yeah.
So
I sent something out to you guys today about
Yeah,
that.
I missed that. Oh, I missed that, okay.
Well, and that's what-
So,
yeah,
do you have a date that you're gonna,
Well, so here's what I sent you, and I need your feedback. So, I mean, we've not done this before, like we've met, like I've tried to go meet with the legislators, I think last year, Vice Chair and Chair went or something. So we got to a couple of them. We also meet with all the ones who will come each year as superintendents. We do a lunch in the summer, so we do that. But I would like to, this is what I basically said today, is that I would like to try this, invite a legislator to school. And so I sent you the email that I would send, and I also kind of identified a bunch of dates. There's about 6 different ones. Mornings are best. So I think it's probably impossible to think, we could get, them in on all the dates that coincide best with you guys, but definitely I would like to get them in and then let you know when they're coming. Look at the dates that I sent you and let me know to the extent that we can coordinate the dates. Would love to do that. But, I definitely would like to extend those invitations and see if they'll come in.
But I'd like to see if you personally do that. I think he may take you up on it.
Yeah, I'll do that as well.
And I know he can't before next Tuesday, but.
Yeah, I'll do that
because
as well.
he's busy, but,
Sure.
I mean,
And this, like Joe McNamara takes in Penn Forest. There you go again for division. I mean, as far as who represents who.
Yeah, so check that email and get back to me as far as
Starkey
the
Road.
dates go. What I asked for, dates and, whatever else I said,
whoever.
so.
Yeah, I had Chris Head in too, and of course, he's moving over a little
Yeah.
bit, but.
And the two things I think that we
Senate-
ought to, I think it's nice for them to come in and see our school, but also the two asks that I would propose that we just sort of emphasize be one, obviously anything they can continue to do as far as, school construction renovation, one, and then secondly, I'd like to keep, because I think Senator Suderline actually was pretty favorable if we get
Last
Senator
year.
Edwards lined up on this whole support cap issue, which is basically how they don't fully fund. If we could really specify, hey, at least do our instructional assistants. Give us that full reimbursement for them, make a specific ask, I think we might get somewhere. So I think those two things would be the two things that I would want to emphasize.
yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Just for the record, I was joking about those electric school buses.
I don't think you were. I don't think.
Yes.
Anything else with that?
You better count
Meeting
that down.
adjourned.
I think you were serious.